This small celestial prefecture was located in the center of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, and there were tens of thousands of immortal mansions and exquisite buildings. Prince Mo was in a heavenly hall in this small celestial prefecture. The golden crows that controlled the light and darkness of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture were locked in a golden cage on the Fusong tree for the master of the heavenly palace to see and control. Tens of thousands of cranes flew and rested in the clouds. From time to time, they turned into immortal spirits and lay in the clouds, casting curious looks at Jian Wushuang and the others. After stepping into the small celestial prefecture, Jian Wushuang saw the vast heavenly palace next to the Fusong tree. The three figures stepped on the bluestone path and approached the heavenly hall. The sun was setting, and it was almost night in the celestial prefecture. As he ascended, he stepped on the tens of thousands of immortal residences and jade palaces. The majestic heavenly palace at the peak of the mountain gradually became clear. Jian Wushuang, Chun Qing, and Chun Xiu looked at each other as they landed on the heavenly palace. Then, they lowered their heads and entered the heavenly palace. As the clouds drifted and the wind blew, ethereal music could be heard coming from the heavenly hall. From time to time, more than 10 maids dressed in silk clothes would walk along the jade corridor with silver plates in their hands. In the vast lotus ponds on both sides of the heavenly hall, there were koi children who had attained Tao. They were lying between the lotus petals and playing in the water out of boredom. As soon as they saw a few new faces, they hurriedly stepped on the clouds and moved over. "Go away, all of you, go away. The uncles are doing serious business. We'll play with you later." Chang Qing waved his arms and kept driving away the koi children who were surrounding him. Perhaps these little guys were too bored in the lotus pond. After hearing Chang Qing's words, not only did they not retreat, but they also giggled and all laid on his body to interact. In order to prevent any more trouble, Jian Wushuang and Chun Xiu had to help pick up the little guys from Chang Qing and throw them into the lotus pond one by one. At this moment, an illusory yet sullen voice suddenly rang out in the hall. "I say, you three big idiots, is this how you treat those little ones? Do you know that they are my children?" Jian Wushuang's body stiffened, and he subconsciously looked at the source of the sound. He saw a figure in a gauze dress standing on the roof of the heavenly hall, looking at him with a faint smile. Her two jade-like legs drooped in the air through the gauze, as if they were covered by a layer of faint moonlight. As her pair of delicate feet swayed in the air, the silver bells on her ankles gave out an extremely clear and crisp sound. A gust of wind blew past and lifted her veil, revealing a beautiful face. Immediately after, the koi children that had been thrown into the lotus pond all transformed back into their original forms and floated toward the mysterious and beautiful woman. The figure stood up and stepped on the colorful glass with her bare feet. Koi fish swam around her in the wind. Looking at the beautiful scene where the fairy Qi was about to reach the critical point, Jian Wushuang's eyes became more vigilant. He subconsciously reached for his waist, only to realize that his tarot divine sword had been destroyed by Ding Bei Chun in the heavenly court sword heaven. "Hey! I'm asking you guys a question. You three big idiots." She pushed aside the immortal cloud in front of her and looked at the three of them with her almond-shaped eyes. Finally, her gaze fell on Jian Wushuang's face. "Brother Jian, what's our next step? We won't be exposed, right?" Chun Xiu lowered his head, feeling a little anxious. "We definitely won't be exposed. How big of a wave can a sissy cause?" Chang Qing said in a low voice. "Brother Jian, in my opinion, let's ignore her. Let's just charge in." Jian Wushuang then spoke in a respectful tone. "Immortal, we three brothers have just joined the heavenly hall and are being unreasonable. If we offend you, please forgive us." The woman standing on the eve of the heavenly hall flew down with the wind and landed in front of Jian Wushuang. The veil around her body surged. Jian Wushuang pulled away without a trace. "So it's your first time on duty. I was wondering when you stupid fellows appeared in the heavenly palace." An angry voice came out from under the veil. "But this is not an excuse. You just bullied my children. And now I punish you all to jump into the lotus pond and swim one round." Chun Xiu and Chun Qing looked at each other, their expressions troubled. Jian Wushuang replied, I'm afraid that's a little inappropriate. It's our first time on duty, and it's not good to wear wet clothes. When the veiled woman heard this, she wanted to say something, but a call rang out. My lady, the young master is calling for you. A maidservant stood in front of the heavenly hall and said respectfully. The lady did not answer. Instead, she looked at Jian Wushuang and the other two and said, You're lucky. I'll let you off this time. After she finished speaking, she ran towards the heavenly hall with her bare feet. After she had gone far away, Chen Qing said angrily, If we weren't in Prince Mo's territory, I would have let that woman know what cruelty is. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. He looked around the heavenly hall and was about to explore the next step. The woman who had disappeared quietly reappeared under the corridor pillar. What are you all standing there for? Come in with me, she said indifferently, her tone unquestionable. The three of them looked at each other before entering the heavenly hall together. The palace door slowly opened, and a warm fragrance hit his face. In the center of the magnificent heavenly palace, a huge incense burner was slowly blowing out smoke. There were 18 giant pillars on both sides that depicted the mountains and seas, and there were seats beside each giant pillar for the banquet. At the same time, there were hundreds of female dancers dancing in the clouds and smoke. It was an extravagant scene. After the veiled woman stepped into the giant hall with her bare feet, she stepped on the flowing clouds on the ground and ran around as she pleased like an immortal spirit that grew freely between the heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang's eyes locked onto the deepest part of the heavenly hall at once. Over there, the fifth prince, Prince Mo, who was dressed in luxurious clothes, was sitting at the head of the table. He was enjoying the dance of the female dancers with a drunken look. It was only when he saw the veiled woman, who was as light as a celestial deer, approaching that he stood up unconsciously and said happily, Yin Ling, you're here. The maids on both sides brought over a set of luxurious clothes and helped her change. It's the same old style every day. I'm sick of looking at it. The veiled woman, Yin Ling, who was wrapped in a white fur coat, sat beside Prince Mo and pouted. Prince Mo seemed to be excited and a little nervous about Yin Ling's arrival. Okay, I won't watch it anymore. I'll watch the competition later. After saying that, Prince Mo turned around and waved his hand impatiently. The dancers then left. A moment later, another 20 handsome young men with red lips and white teeth slowly walked to the center of the hall. Brother Jian, have you ever heard that Prince Mo is lustful? Jian Wushuang was confused as he looked at Chen Qing's mysterious expression. Chen Qing laughed secretly again. This isn't a groundless rumor. There have been rumors for a long time that Prince Mo likes men. He once captured all the young geniuses in the entire commandery and sent them to his northern heaven celestial prefecture. He said that he was nurturing them, but in fact, they were all taken care of by him so that he could enjoy them at any time. For example, these handsome young men who came out may be the male pets he is taking care of. Although Jian Wushuang was still expressionless, he was actually disgusted. Looking at the 20 or so handsome youths who had walked out, each of them had an imperceptible gentleness between their brows, which seemed to indirectly prove that what Chen Qing had said was true. Whatever he likes has nothing to do with us. We'll immediately withdraw after we find the heaven-patterned bone armor and try not to have any disputes, Jian Wushuang said in a low voice. Chen Qing and Chen Qiu nodded and did not say anything more. The three of them were now celestial prefecture guards on duty in the heavenly hall. In addition, they had disguised themselves to look extremely ordinary, so they were almost unnoticeable in a crowd. Therefore, they stood by the two giant pillars on both sides of the hall, acting as guards. Originally, Jian Wushuang had no intention of entering the giant hall. Instead, he was going to walk around the heavenly hall. However, his plan was disrupted by Goddess Yin Ling standing on one side of the giant pillar. He cast his gaze to the center of the hall, where a group of handsome youths were currently performing the sword dance with all their heart. The so-called sword dance was more of an aesthetic than a practical one. Although each of them had a steady sword momentum, they lacked decisiveness and fierceness, so it was obviously for the sake of viewing. Although these handsome young men were all rare sword talents, Jian Wushuang obviously did not have any appreciation for them. If one wanted to cultivate the way of the sword, the most important thing was to have the innate qi in one's heart since childhood. It was the foundation. In the end, all things were vast, and all kinds of Dao techniques emerged one after another. Although the sword Dao was special, it did not escape the rules of the great Dao. Naturally, the seedlings of the way of the sword would also be born with the flow of time. All these naturally did not affect Jian Wushuang's state of mind at all. Hugging the soft Yin-Ling, the drunk Prince Mo watched the sword dance performance with a smile. He seemed to be extremely satisfied. Extremely boring. It's really too boring. Yin-Ling, who was sitting at the head of the table, said unhappily. Upon hearing this, Prince Mo looked away. What's the matter, Yin-Ling? Are you not satisfied? Yin-Ling pursed her lips. Of course not. Do you know how many times I've watched it? Why don't you change it to something new? All right. We'll do as you say, Prince Mo said dotingly. Yin-Ling pouted as if she was thinking of something new, and then she glanced into the hall. Oh no! Jian Wushuang exclaimed in his heart. Before he could even withdraw his body, he heard an excited voice. It's you then, that stupid fellow from before. Step forward. Yin-Ling stood up and pointed at him with her slender hand. Jian Wushuang was speechless. He had no choice but to walk to the center of the hall. The haziness in Prince Mo's eyes faded away. He looked at the ordinary-looking young guard standing in the middle of the hall and felt that he had met him before. However, he did not think too much about it. After all, at this time, the most important thing was to win Yin-Ling's favor. After pointing at Jian Wushuang, Yin-Ling looked around slowly and finally found a young guard who was also not too conspicuous. It'll be the two of you. I can feel that both of you have extraordinary skills. Why don't you practice martial art here? The corner of Yin-Ling's mouth curled up into a smile. At the same time, she waved her sleeves, and 2 strips of cloth fluttered. She pulled out 2 true swords and threw them at the two. Jian Wushuang caught the true sword and frowned. He did not like this feeling, especially the feeling of being ordered around. If it were not for the urgent matter at hand, Jian Wushuang would have wanted to kill her. He collected his emotions and looked at the young guard who had also been called out. Jian Wushuang did not see any emotion in his eyes. It was as if he could not remember anything. Let's begin. Please do your best. If it's not exciting enough, there might be punishment. Yin-Ling covered her mouth and chuckled. Chong Qing, who was hiding next to the giant pillar, gritted his teeth and said, Damn it! If I have no other choice, I will kill this woman first. Count me in. Chun Qiu's eyes were cold. He seemed to be ready to attack when Jian Wushuang gave the signal. At that moment, there was only Jian Wushuang and the young guard in the grand main hall. He stood tall like a mountain holding his sword. The aura around him was restrained, like a supreme sword intent that was hiding its edge and waiting to be activated. In the face of any potential enemy, he would always go all out. This was a habit that Jian Wushuang had developed during his long cultivation journey. Even in this sparring, he did not relax in the slightest. The young guard, who was also standing with a sword in his hand, stood in the distance. His clear eyes, which should have belonged to a young man, suddenly showed an extremely old look. Naturally, Jian Wushuang saw the change. However, without waiting for him to think, the young guard was the first to burst out and slash down with his sword. Jian Wushuang raised his sword to deal with it. The 2 blades made contact and a crisp sound was heard. It was only an instant of exchange, but a thick sword intent spread out in all directions. Although it was only one exchange, they had already exchanged thousands of blows in an instant. Jian Wushuang was secretly shocked. Since when could an ordinary Yen Immortal sword principle be evenly matched with his? The young guard did not even have time to think. He raised his sword and slashed. There was an undetectable ruthlessness in his indifferent face. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold as he managed to force him back several steps with a stroke of his sword. The young guard's killing intent, which was hidden under his indifferent expression, was slowly emerging. At this point, he began to be somewhat certain that the young guard in front of him was definitely not a guard of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. In other words, this guy should be the same as Jian Wushuang and the other two who had sneaked in under a fake identity. An uncertain thought rose in Jian Wushuang's mind. The two true swords collided once again. The aftershock of the explosion that was produced at the point of collision swept away all the clouds and smoke in the entire heavenly hall. Jian Wushuang exerted all his strength on the true sword in his hand and approached the young guard. "No matter what your goal is, you'd better not have any ideas about me." The young guard was slightly stunned. He quickly looked at Jian Wushuang with a pair of cloudy eyes that were filled with doubt and scrutiny. Then, he suddenly retreated more than 100 feet away. The hall was silent as everyone held their breath and watched the scene with rapt attention. The sword-wielders frowned when they saw the confrontation that was completed in almost an instant. This was because the sword intent that emanated from their confrontation was not something that ordinary sword cultivators could compare to. Especially the sword intent that swept up in that instant. Even those who were close to it felt a kind of dense killing intent as if their divine soul was being cut. Jian Wushuang stood there with his sword in hand, seemingly not intending to continue the fight. The young guard also had no intention of fighting. After drawing his sword, he prepared to retreat. "Stop! Did I say you could go back?" A cold voice sounded. Prince Mo, who was sitting at the head of the table, leaned forward. His drunken eyes were full of coldness, as if he was going to kill someone in the next moment. The figure that was about to retreat stopped at this moment. He looked at him with a pair of heroic eyes, then cupped his hands and said, "Stop when you've reached a certain point. If we continue fighting, I'm afraid we'll become a joke. If young master insists on watching, why don't you let us compose a sword dance for you?" When Prince Mo heard this, he looked at the handsome guard and his expression softened. "All right, if you don't satisfy me, I'll take your heads." The young guard replied and turned around. A total of 6 guards in uniform slowly walked out from the side. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's eyebrows twitched and he retreated without a trace. "Brother Jian, what's the situation?" Cheng Qing asked in a low voice. "If the situation doesn't look right, run," he said in a low voice, and a serious look flashed in his eyes. By now, Jian Wushuang was completely sure that the 7 guards were the 7 swordsmen he had seen in the pavilion of the Immortal Mansion in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Right now, they had all sneaked into the heavenly hall, and their target seemed to be only Prince Mo. Chun Qing and Chun Qiu became serious. They knew Jian Wushuang's character well, and he would never speak without thinking. If he said there was a situation, then there must be a situation. For a moment, Cheng Qing's gaze fell on the 7 ordinary-looking figures in the middle of the hall. Without any unnecessary words, the 7 figures spread out in a triangular formation. Then, the 7 true swords, which were surrounded by yen power, pointed forward. The atmosphere in the entire hall began to change subtly. Jian Wushuang led Chun Qing and Chun Qiu toward the gate of Heaven Palace without leaving a trace, but they were stopped by Lady Yinling, who was sitting at the head of the table. At this moment, the sword dance that was formed by the 7 people began. With the young guard leading the group, the 7 real swords moved with yen power and began to move around the hall. The clouds and smoke coming out of the huge incense burner in the center of the hall also gradually transformed into various scenes under the control of these sword intents. It was like a dragon leaping through the sea of clouds, or a crouching tiger roaring. There were countless changes. Seeing this beautiful scene, the top cultivators and yen immortals sitting on the 2 sides of the hall could not help but clap their hands and cheer. Prince Mo, who was sitting at the head of the table, also nodded his head repeatedly. He seemed to be very satisfied with the sword dance of these 7 people. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang was a little unsettled because he had just discovered that there was a trace of yen power that was even more powerful in the team of 7. Although it was only revealed for a moment, Jian Wushuang immediately realized it. At that level, it was very likely that he had transcended the yen immortal realm. Could it be that they want to assassinate Prince Mo? He seemed to have thought of something and looked at Prince Mo unknowingly. The 7 figures were getting closer and closer to him. The clouds and smoke gradually spread throughout the entire hall, making every top cultivator feel as if they were on top of the clouds, floating like immortals. At this moment, Prince Mo's eyes were gradually filled with excitement, and the drunkenness in his eyes was even more apparent. In the formation of 7 people, the young guard at the front held a real sword in his hand, and his aura was extremely powerful. His eyes, which were already slightly old, quietly revealed a cold killing intent. In the next moment, he suddenly leaped up and stepped on the clouds. Under the gaze of all the top cultivators and Yen immortals, he held the true sword in his hand tightly and stabbed it at Prince Mo. The air seemed to freeze. Everything that was about to happen happened at this moment. The sword that was surrounded by supreme Yen power stabbed at him without any hesitation. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A large part of the space in front of Prince Mo collapsed without any warning, forcibly changing the position of the sword. The sword that was originally aimed at Prince Mo's head was forced to move. In the end, it pierced through his cheekbone without any resistance and nailed him firmly to the palace chair. A blood-curdling screech resounded as divine blood gushed out. The entire left side of Prince Mo's body was directly minced into pieces. The true sword had pierced through half of his head, and the tip of the sword was more than an inch deep into the palace chair. However, this attack did not take his life at all. In fact, it was still a distance away from the immortal source in his mind. After failing to kill him with one strike, the young guard immediately struck out with his palm, vowing to kill Prince Mo completely. However, the supreme pressure that came with it suppressed his momentum. A black-robed figure walked out from behind Prince Mo. He also extended his palm and struck at the young guard. The 2 rays of Yen power collided, and a loud sound was heard. Then, the young guard was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. At this moment, all the top cultivators and Yen immortals reacted and controlled their Yen power to surround the 7 people. The 6 figures who were standing still in the same place also moved. Each of them was like a ghost. After catching the young guard, they immediately began to kill. One of the tall and thin figures put his palms together in front of his chest and then suddenly tore it apart. The boundless Yen power directly tore the space apart, and the more than 20 top cultivators who had surrounded him were turned into powder. Another figure clenched his fist and punched the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The entire heavenly hall trembled, and then fine cracks appeared on the white jade floor. The 6 figures exploded with their most terrifying strength at this moment. Every one of them had the terrifying power to easily kill Yen immortals. At this point, the entire hall fell into chaos. At the first moment of the riot, Jian Wushuang was the first to react. He directly reached out to blast open the palace door and ran away with the 2 of them. In such a chaotic situation that was completely out of control, even he would probably die on the spot if he was not careful. Brother Jian, this is too exciting. It seems like that Prince Mo will definitely die today. In the sky, among the 3 figures who were fleeing at full speed, Chang Qing said with an excited expression, "It's really like a reincarnation cycle. Someone actually came to assassinate him." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang, who was originally running away, suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked at the hall that was on the verge of collapsing. He finally said, "No, I have to go back." Chang Qing was stunned when he heard this, and then he hurriedly said, "Brother Jian, are you joking? Prince Mo's life is already in danger." Jian Wushuang said, "Prince Mo, you can't die now. Once you dies, there will be no more news about the heaven-patterned bone armor. Is that heaven-patterned bone armor even more important than your life?" Chang Qing was also anxious. He knew the aura in the hall better than Jian Wushuang. It was precisely because he knew that he wanted to stop Jian Wushuang from going to his death. "Of course, it's not as important as my life," Jian Wushuang said with a smile. "But the current situation is the best situation." After saying that, he immediately leaped forward, not afraid of the collapsing hall at all. "Brother Chun Qing, are you afraid?" Chun Qiu raised his eyebrows and smiled. Then he caught up with Jian Wushuang without any hesitation. "Who's afraid? Can such a small scene intimidate me? Chang Qing?" Chang Qing was anxious, but he gritted his teeth and followed. In the chaotic heavenly palace, the top cultivators and Yen immortals were dying one after another. The ground had completely collapsed, and the entire palace was in a state of collapse. The 7 figures were like 7 huge rocks. Not a single Yen immortal could shake them. Prince Mo, who had his cheekbone pierced by the sword and was nailed to the chair, stopped wailing. He clenched the blade of the sword and pulled the entire sword out of his head. At this moment, the entire left side of Prince Mo's face had been replaced by a huge bloody hole. Even one of his eyeballs had been shattered. As the son of the Great Sea Region's emperor, he had never been so humiliated before. "Kill them all. Don't leave a single one." A voice that sounded like someone weeping blood resounded. The black-robed figure who had saved his life earlier nodded respectfully. "Yes, 5th Prince." He took a step forward, and a boundless force spread out, causing the originally white-hot slaughter to stop. Black Robe extended his withered palm and slowly pulled down his hood, revealing an old face full of wrinkles. "Hand over your heads, and I'll let you die a good death. Otherwise, you'll be ground to ashes." An ancient voice rang out from Black Robe's mouth. Behind him, there was a dim black wheel of light. If Jian Wushuang had been there, he would have realized that the black light wheels were the same as the light wheels on the backs of the founding elders in the heavenly court. This was the symbol of someone who had completely stepped into the Grand Yen Immortal level from the Yen Immortal level. The 7 figures did not seem to be intimidated by a Grand Yen Immortal. There were 2 figures who shook their arms and a light wheel appeared behind them. 2 more Grand Yen Immortals. The top cultivators and Yen Immortals who were planning to fight to the death all took a step back and left the battlefield after seeing this. "It's really a big move. I was wondering why you weren't afraid. It turns out that you've already made full preparations." The elder in Black Robe's eyes showed no fear. "With me around, you won't be able to hurt the 5th Prince." With a cold sneer, the young guard who showed the Grand Yen Immortal Cultivation realm took a step forward and his palms struck out. An attack that completely exceeded the power of a Yen Immortal smashed toward the elder in a black robe. The Black Robe elder tried to resist, sending out a shock wave. Under such a shock wave, even the giant pillars in the palace were shattered, and even a Yen Immortal could not stand still. Prince Mo was sent flying. He lay on the ground in a sorry state. He looked around with his remaining eye, as if he was looking for something. As soon as the battle broke out, Yin Ling, who had been snuggling up to him, disappeared without a trace, as if she had never appeared. "5th Prince, run, run!" The white-robed Yen Immortal, who had been following Prince Mo, appeared at the right time and dragged him away. Prince Mo acted as if he had not heard anything. His ferocious face was expressionless. "Tell me, is it Prince Zhou or the rest of my brothers who want me dead? Let's not think about this for now. Let's quickly escape to the heavenly court." The white-robed Yen Immortal was also scared out of his wits by this scene. The assassination attempt carried out by 2 Grand Yen Immortals was a terrifying move that no force in the entire Great Sea region could pull off. However, it had actually happened. "Prince Zhou, it must be Prince Zhou. I want him to pay with his life." Prince Mo shouted as his aura rose at an unbelievable speed. Seeing that Prince Mo was still alive, the 2 Grand Yen Immortals, who were suppressing one with 2, waved their hands. The remaining 5 figures understood tacitly and immediately tore through the encirclement and rushed over. Even if Prince Mo had mastered and comprehended an immortal style, it would be of no use in the current situation. By the time the venomous snake behind him revealed its fangs, it was already too late. There was no turning back. The white-robed Yen Immortal in front of him could only defend with his hands before he was turned into dust. Prince Mo stood rooted to the ground as he faced the figures that were about to surround him. At this moment, a figure with great momentum moved the clouds and rode the wind, rushing into the hall with unimaginable speed. None of the 5 figures who had surrounded Prince Mo noticed this. The tall and thin man at the front held a true sword in his hand and stabbed at his immortal source without any unnecessary movements. A sudden change occurred. The tall and thin figure only felt a heavy kick on his back, and then his entire body flew out. Jian Wushuang kicked a gap in the encirclement and picked up Prince Mo to retreat without any hesitation. The other 4 figures saw this and clenched their fists in the air. Jian Wushuang felt his chest tighten and his retreating speed slowed down for a moment. Without thinking, he condensed an invisible sword in his right hand and cut off the invisible aura that bound him. "Chase!" The five of them shouted in unison and tried to capture Jian Wushuang. But then, a majestic sword intent surged from Jian Wushuang's back like a great river and ocean, directly pushing toward the five figures. "I say, can you change your target? Perhaps target me instead." With a sword in his left hand and a wine pot in his right hand, Changqing's carefree figure stood in front of the group. "Get lost!" Five figures pounced at him. Changqing shouted as he drew his sword to fight. After getting a moment to catch his breath, Prince Mo looked at this ordinary-looking but valiant-looking guard and felt that he had a familiar aura. Looking at the miserable Prince Mo, Jian Wushuang pressed him against a giant pillar with one hand and took out a heaven-patterned bone armor covered with complicated patterns. "Give me this thing." What is it?" Prince Mo looked at Jian Wushuang, who was not a good person, and then at the heaven-patterned bone armor in his hand. He felt that it was familiar. "Don't play any tricks with me. Hand this thing over to me and I'll spare your life. Otherwise, I'll crush your immortal source before they kill you," Jian Wushuang said in a cold voice. Prince Mo shivered inexplicably. The strong desire to live caused the memories of the past to gradually resurface in his mind. "I think I have a piece of this too. I have it with me." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang grabbed Prince Mo's neck with one hand and put his other hand into his arms. Under the combined attack of the five mysterious figures, Changqing could not hold on for too long, and he was already starting to find it difficult to hold on. He wanted to find the heaven-patterned bone armor in less than 10 breaths and escape from this place. However, at the next moment, a brutal look suddenly flashed in the eyes of the completely immobile Prince Mo. The palm behind his back emitted a faint light and directly stabbed at Jian Wushuang. A strong sense of danger welled up in his heart. Almost at the same time as the dim light stabbed toward him, he moved his head away by an inch. However, it was still too late. The palm with dim light left a long and narrow wound on Jian Wushuang's neck, and divine blood spurted out. Feeling the pain, he subconsciously loosened his grip. Prince Mo took the opportunity to force him back with another palm strike and then quickly escaped. "You're looking for death." Jian Wushuang was furious. His severely injured neck recovered at an extremely fast speed. He struck forward with his palm and the supreme power almost blocked all of Prince Mo's escape routes. However, the situation changed again. Prince Mo put all his strength into his left arm and tore apart Jian Wushuang's magnificent power at the cost of his arm. Then, Prince Mo turned around and glared at him with hatred. His figure flashed and he fled out of the hall. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang would not let him go. He immediately informed Changqing and Xianxia, who were struggling to resist, and then chased after him. "I'm done playing with you guys." The blue veins on Changqing's forehead bulged, and he was almost hung up and beaten to the point where he barely managed to escape. The five figures were very clear on their target, and they did not intend to continue fighting with him. Once they separated, they directly flew out of the hall. The entire heavenly hall was collapsing. More than half of the top cultivators and Yen immortals who had gone to the banquet at the Heavenly Palace had been killed in this sudden battle. The remaining survivors had long escaped from the palace. At this point, there were only 3 grand Yen immortals left in the crumbling Heavenly Hall. 2 against 1, the black-robed elder was in a sorry state. The suppression of the 2 grand Yen immortals made it difficult for him to escape, and even his immortal body was on the verge of collapse. Although he had been sleeping in the Heavenly Palace for a long time, the black-robed elder knew very well that the number of Grand Yen Immortals in the vast Great Sea region, other than the 99 Grand Yen Immortals under Emperor Zhen Wuyang, could be counted on one hand. The so-called Grand Yen Immortal was a profound existence that completely transcended the Yen Immortal level. Only by reaching the profound realm of the Grand Yen Immortal would one have the opportunity to touch the Emperor's fate energy. From this, one could see how rare and terrifying Grand Yen Immortals were. However, there were 2 Grand Yen Immortals who had come to kill Prince Mo. This was a huge move. In the entire Great Sea region, who could have such a heaven-defying authority? He could not imagine it at all. He even thought that it was an order from Jin Wuyang. Who are you people? Do you know that killing Prince Mo is equivalent to making an enemy of Emperor Jin Wuyang and the entire Great Sea region? The black-robed elder was still holding on to his last hope, despite his bitter resistance, attempting to let them know the serious consequences. However, the two grand Yen immortals who were fighting him turned a blind eye to it. They did not care about the so-called Emperor Jin Wuyang and the entire Great Sea region. The terrifying Yen power had already crushed the heavenly palace on this small celestial prefecture into pieces. Countless broken walls fell on the celestial prefecture. It was a scene of destruction. As for Prince Mo, who had escaped from the heavenly palace, he was now like a stray dog, running for his life while dragging his broken arm. Above the entire minor celestial province, the crimson prairie and the clouds of the polar night showed faint signs of collapsing under the battle of the grand Yen immortals. Jian Wushuang followed closely behind. The long and narrow wound on his neck had completely healed without leaving a single scar. Everything that had happened had far exceeded his expectations. He had never expected that there would be others who would come to kill Prince Mo. And from the looks of it, it seemed like they were here to completely annihilate him. Jian Wushuang did not care about his life or death, but the impact and consequences of this matter would be huge. As the fifth son of Emperor Jin Wuyang, if he were to die, all the top cultivators and Yen immortals in this battle would be investigated. The three of them would most likely be dragged into this as well. Therefore, Prince Mo could not die. Even if he did, he could not die in their hands. Finding the heaven-patterned bone armor and then quietly escaping was the best solution at the moment. Chun Qing and Chun Qiu were in charge of bringing up the rear, keeping the masterminds of this incident, the 5 of the 7 swordsmen, at their backs. Jian Wushuang was the only one chasing after Prince Mo in the clouds. The clouds were vast, and the real terror of life and death made him burst out his last potential. Even Jian Wushuang, who was chasing with all his strength, felt a little bit of difficulty, and the distance between them was not short. Prince Mo broke through the clouds and fled toward the center of the entire small celestial prefecture. There was a fusang tree that reached the heavens, with the celestial province as its foundation. However, the crown that covered the sky was made up of huge dark green branches without a single leaf. On the crown of the tree there was a huge golden cage. Inside the golden cage, there was a huge sun that one could not look at directly. At this moment, Prince Mo's flustered figure had already rushed to the front of the fusang tree. "Di Qing, save me!" A panicked and frightened voice came out of Prince Mo's mouth. He was already an arrow at the end of its flight and had placed all his hopes on his voice. In the golden cage of the fusang tree, the dazzling sun moved. The bird's head with the scarlet golden wheel of light slowly lifted. It was a golden crow with 4 eyes. As it raised its head, the polar night was dispelled, and its 2 pairs of red eyes were like 4 great suns, so bright that one could not look directly at them. Screech, a screech that seemed capable of tearing apart the entire heavenly realm resounded. The dark night of the entire northern heaven celestial prefecture was dispelled, and brilliant light descended. The golden cage was opened, and it spread its wings and flew out. As its wings spread out, the radiance of the world shone on the celestial prefecture. A total of 9 long scarlet-purple feathers descended from the golden crow's tail, forming a huge sun with the golden crow's wings spreading out. It carried a supreme and majestic aura. At that moment, even Jian Wushuang raised his hand to cover his eyes subconsciously and could not take another step forward. Hot, it was too hot. A burning sensation from the depths of the soul made even a Yen immortal retreat. The power of the 9-tailed true crow could no longer be measured by Yen immortals. Jian Wushuang felt that it was about to reach a mysterious realm and reach another level. Based on his current understanding, this aura was already infinitely close to the top existences of the heavenly court. There were 99 grand Yen immortals who had transcended the Yen immortal stage under Jin Wuyang's throne. This was what Jian Wushuang had learned after attending the feast in the heavenly court. He knew very little about the grand Yen immortal stage. He only knew that it was almost impossible for ordinary Yen immortals to achieve it. Even Chun Qing did not know how long he had been stuck at that step. When Jian Wushuang was transporting the Black Mountain Crystal during the early stage, he met Wild Fox Koan, the Whirling Patriarch. That guy was probably the closest to the Grand Yen Immortal. When he was about to advance, Jian Wushuang destroyed his immortal source with the power of an emperor. Right now, this nine-tailed true crow that had the power to cut across the great momentum had the power of the Grand Yen Immortal. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but smile bitterly. The level of Grand Yen Immortal was not something he could contend with at all. Just the aura that it exuded was a great threat. However, Jian Wushuang did not want to retreat. He did not want everything he had done to be in vain. They would only retreat when the situation turned bad. When he saw the golden crow's outstretched body, Prince Mo seemed to have grabbed onto his last life-saving straw and charged straight at it. However, the next moment, a change occurred. Two boundless sky-tearing auras smashed toward Prince Mo like two graceful birds, clearly aiming to kill him. However, the expected situation did not happen. The two great forces did not even land on Prince Mo's body. The moment they swept over, they were shattered by the golden crow's wings. The aftermath spread in all directions. Although Prince Mo had escaped death, he could not even withstand the aftermath. He opened his mouth and spat out a large mouthful of divine blood. At the same time, two figures quietly appeared. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank slightly. The two figures were the two Grand Yen Immortals who had fought in the Heavenly Hall just now. He slowly retreated, already prepared to escape at any time. In a battle at the level of a Grand Yen Immortal, the control of Yen power was not on the same level as that of a Yen Immortal. The difference between the two was even greater than the difference between a mortal and a Yen Immortal. Therefore, Jian Wushuang was not thinking about how to deal with the Grand Yen Immortal, but thinking about an escape route. The golden crow glanced at the two Grand Yen Immortals with its scarlet golden ring of light, then turned to look at the still frightened Prince Mo. Di Qing, hurry up and kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Prince Mo gasped for breath. The big hole on his face that had been pierced by the true sword had already recovered, and his face was strangely pale. The golden crow's eyes flashed with a human-like look of disgust. I've said it before, if you dare to call me by my name again, I'll burn you to ashes. Prince Mo shivered, as if he did not doubt the authenticity of its words at all. I understand. Master D, do me another favor. Wipe out all these people who want to kill me. The golden crow, whose name was Di Qing, glanced at the two Grand Yen Immortals again, then looked at him with a faint smile and said, to attract such a powerful being to intercept you, Prince Mo, your abilities have improved a lot. Hearing this, Prince Mo's expression changed slightly. In any case, you have to solve this problem as soon as possible. I want none of them to live. A ferocious smile flashed across Di Qing's eyes, and he suddenly flapped his wings. Whether they can live or not depends on my mood, not your decision. The giant wings that covered the sky spread out for thousands of miles, and a screeching sound resounded in the sky. Jian Wushuang felt that his eardrums were about to be torn apart. He no longer hesitated and was ready to escape. The Yen power force displayed by the golden crow had already exceeded his imagination, not to mention that there were two Grand Yen Immortals. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to leave, a long sword with a chilling intent was pressed against his back. If you don't want to die, don't leave. A cold voice sounded. Jian Wushuang turned around and saw that it was the young guard who had competed with him in the Heavenly Hall. At the same time, four more figures pulled Changqing and Chunqiu over. Brother Jian, I'm ashamed. Chunqing, whose face was bruised, let out a long sigh. It was obvious that he had been beaten up a lot before this. Jian Wushuang looked at the young guard behind him and said in a deep voice, "This is between you guys. We will leave now and not participate in the fight." Cut the crap. Do you think you can still escape unscathed? The young guard said coldly. Seeing that there was no hope of leaving, Jian Wushuang was ready to fight when the fiercest battle broke out in the clouds. The two great forces soared through the clouds and collided with Di Qing, causing the fiercest explosion. Even the Fusang tree was shaking. Prince Mo, who was hiding in the crown of the Fusang tree, was like a bird that was startled by the mere twang of a bough. As soon as the battle broke out, Di Qing broke away from his golden crow form and turned into a divine realm expert. As the illusionary wings with golden patterns flapped, the two grand yen immortals were unable to move an inch. Di Qing's handsome face had a bit of unrestraint and evil as he looked at the two of them proudly. If you retreat now, I won't pursue the matter. If you still insist, I'll kill you. Upon hearing this, the two tall and thin grand yen immortals with black light wheels on their backs showed no expression, as if they did not care at all. Their goal was very clear, so it was impossible for them to turn back just because of Di Qing's words. Immediately after, the two grand yen immortals joined forces again. A huge palm that distorted the clouds and descended smashed at Di Qing. Di Qing was not afraid. With a ferocious smile in his eyes, he raised his palm and met the attack. In the next moment, Di Qing's seemingly light palm actually stopped the descending giant palm. A red light curled around his palm and instantly covered the entire sky, covering palm with the power of a prairie fire. In just a short moment, the combined attack of the two grand yen immortals was completely burned by the red light, not even leaving a trace of breath. Suppress! With two loud roars, the mighty yen power quietly condensed into a huge black cauldron and smashed at Di Qing again. The illusionary crimson golden wings on his back flapped, and each wisp of crimson light transformed into a light golden crow. Tens of thousands of golden crows formed a formation and charged forward. Boom, boom, boom. The collision of the two forces continued to consume energy. The pure black yen power and the pure gold yen power wreaked havoc in the clouds, and finally, the clouds could not bear it and began to shatter. As the huge black cauldron dimmed, Di Qing's sneer grew more ferocious. At the same time, 9 long scarlet-purple feathers grew from the tip of his hair. He held one of the long feathers in his hand and pointed the tip at one of the great evolution immortals. He said casually, "Since you insist on not leaving, then all of you will stay here. I will let you know that even a grand yen immortal can't fight me." A celestial form of a black crow that blotted out the sky quietly appeared behind Di Qing, and its 4 eyes that were like the sun cast down black flames. At that moment, even the swordsmen who were holding Jian Wushuang and the others hostage retreated. "Enjoy it, everyone. You'll soon feel the wrath of my arrival." Di Qing slowly opened his arms, and beautiful feathers began to hang down from his arms. The two were obviously grand yen immortals who had transformed their faces. They still had no expression on their faces, but from their solemn eyes, Di Qing's words were true. The celestial form of the black crow roared toward the sky. All of the yen power in the entire celestial prefecture gathered toward him, and with an unimaginable force, it pressed down. Wisps of black flames appeared on the black crow celestial form. It suddenly opened its mouth and let out a cry, releasing an infinite amount of black flames. Jian Wushuang and the others saw it clearly. Even if the black flames touched them, they would be killed or at least shed a layer of skin. Suddenly, the young swordsman dragged Jian Wushuang backward. Pathetic! Di Qing smiled coldly. The two grand yen immortals worked together again, and a pitch-black cauldron that was even larger than before blocked in front of them. The black crows cawed and released an infinite amount of fire. It was like a curtain of rain, covering every inch of the space. Whoosh! The frightening black flames even devoured the scattered yen power in the air. When they collided with the pitch-black cauldron, a dense sizzling sound erupted. The earth-shaking power made the retreating people feel an indescribable tightness in their chests. At the same time, black flames rained down on every corner of the celestial prefecture. The large-scale destruction had begun. The tens of thousands of immortal abodes and pavilions that were touched by the black flames all collapsed and turned into dust. The small celestial prefecture, which was originally full of immortal qi, had become a dead zone at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, Prince Mo, who was lying on the top of the fusang tree, felt his heart bleeding when he saw this. All his trump cards had been burned down. "Master D, leave some for me." In the end, he could not help but ask. Di Qing's reply was a cold "get lost." Looking at Di Qing's back, a trace of anger and hatred flashed across Prince Mo's eyes. However, he quickly returned to normal. After all, he could only rely on Di Qing to survive. Just you wait. If I survive this, you'll definitely die without a burial place. Prince Mo thought to himself. The power emitted by the image form of the Black Crow alone could suppress the entire celestial prefecture, and no Yen immortal dared to compete with it. The two grand Yen immortals who bore 90% of Black Crow's black flames finally exhausted their black flames at the cost of the destruction of the huge pitch-black cauldron. Di Qing's face turned cold, and he stretched out his hand and pointed. Immediately, the Black Crow behind him raised its head and let out a shrill cry. Dragging along a terrifying black Yen power, it descended from the sky, determined to swallow the two grand Yen immortals. The small celestial prefecture turned dark and Yen power was no longer quiet. Instead, a violent tide was produced. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang instantly burst out and used his supreme Yen power to sweep away the true sword behind him. Then, with an extremely fast speed, he turned around and knelt down in front of the young guard. Due to the fluctuations of the Yen power tide, all the Yen immortals present were unable to detect the danger in time. Therefore, by the time the young guard reacted, it was already too late. His stomach was hit by Jian Wushuang's full strength. With a muffled groan, he fell headfirst into the small celestial prefecture like a kite that had fallen off its string. Almost at the same time, Changqing and Chun Qiu also suddenly burst out, using Yen power to force the remaining 4 swordsmen away. Then, Chun Qiu summoned his 8-armed Arhat to fight against the swordsman. Brother Jian, let's end this quickly. Chun Qing pulled out the true sword from his waist and looked at Jian Wushuang fiercely. We will cover your retreat. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily. Then, he looked at Prince Mo, who was lying on the Fusong tree, through the layers of waves of the tide. The next moment, he stepped on the clouds and suddenly rushed forward, regardless of the great battle above his head that could destroy the world at any time. Prince Mo, who was like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow, immediately noticed Jian Wushuang who was flying towards him. He immediately became restless and said, Master Di, save me. Di Qing turned his head impatiently. After seeing Jian Wushuang's flying figure, he opened his palm without any hesitation and turned into thousands of strands of Yen power, surrounding him. Thousands of Yen power turned into unparalleled chains and bound Jian Wushuang with an indescribable speed. Yen power at this level could even kill Yen immortals. Jian Wushuang only felt that the air around him was a little stagnant and viscous. The thousands of chains almost instantly bound him. A force strong enough to crush his bones and muscles was applied to his body as the chain tightened. Seeing this, Prince Mo sneered. One of his arms had been broken by Jian Wushuang. Now that his enemy was in front of him, he stepped on the Fusong tree without thinking and flew over. A powerful Yen power blasted out from his palm. Looking at the thousands of chains around him, Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes. Then, a small galaxy formed by 7 stars appeared between his eyebrows. It was an immortal-style move that the broken stone bead had given Jian Wushuang. Little mountain and river. Buzz! A long ripple of water, with him as the center, directly surged out. It was an immortal style that surpassed Yen immortal's comprehension. Break! Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes. The galaxy between his eyebrows rotated and a great power was released. The thousands of chains on his body broke and the formless water dragons broke free from the restraints and occupied his body. Jian Wushuang was the absolute master of the mountains and rivers. After breaking through Di Qing's Yen power, he looked at Di Qing for the first time. When their eyes met, Jian Wushuang was not afraid at all. He stretched out his hand and waved it gently. Suddenly, a huge phenomenon appeared. The small celestial prefecture, which had already been turned into a dead zone by Di Qing's black flames, was suddenly split in half by an unknown force. Then, with countless gravel, wasteland, and half of the celestial prefecture, it smashed directly at Di Qing. Di Qing's eyes narrowed. To be able to single-handedly split the entire small continent into 2, was this the terrifying power that Yen Immortal could control? Half of the small celestial prefecture had come from the sky. Di Qing suppressed the surprise in his eyes and snorted coldly. He reached out his palm and clenched it. Suddenly, the entire small celestial prefecture that was flying over uncontrollably stopped in its original place. Then, as if it was squeezed into a ball by an invisible palm, it was crushed into powder. With a wave of his sleeve, the dust scattered, but Jian Wushuang was nowhere to be seen. Interesting. A little yen immortal can actually threaten me. Is this an illusion? Di Qing looked at the figure that had gone far away with a meaningful look, but he did not make any further moves. He did not stop Jian Wushuang's plan. Instead, he wanted to see what he wanted to do. As for Prince Mo's safety, Di Qing could almost ignore it. At the same time, the two Grand Yen Immortals joined forces and finally defeated Di Qing's Black Crow celestial form. The Black Yen power dissipated, and the two Grand Yen Immortals, one tall and one strong, still stood calmly in their original positions, but their slightly heaving chests showed that they did not win easily. Di Qing revealed a sneer. If that's all you've got, get lost, you overconfident guys. The two Grand Yen Immortals who had been silent finally spoke. We are not the ones who should get out of here. You should be the one getting out of here. If Shen Wuyang finds out that there is someone who is close to the emperor level in his heavenly domain, you will not be able to survive. Hearing this, Di Qing's ferocious smile gradually froze, and his black and white eyes were filled with a strong killing intent. You all dare to threaten me? So what? As long as you continue to fight, the heavenly court will definitely detect your existence, and Shen Wuyang will definitely kill you. The tall and thin Grand Yen Immortal took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "It's not worth it to put yourself in danger for Prince Mo. You can't fight against the entire heavenly court by yourself." Di Qing's face grew colder as he listened. I hate threats the most. Since you are threatening me, you should be prepared to die in front of me. Don't worry. I promise I'll kill you before Shen Wuyang notices. With that, Di Qing reached out and picked up a long feather from his hair. Then, a celestial form of a white crow that blotted out the sky gradually appeared. Compared to the previous black crow, this white crow was even more brutal. Its 4 eyes shot out unparalleled beams of light. Inheritance! Di Qing shouted in a deep voice. He no longer intended to hold back and released the most brutal move, trying to destroy them directly. The battle started again. On the other side, Jian Wushuang got rid of Di Qing's restraint and rushed to Prince Mo. Prince Mo, who had intended to kill him, was so shocked that his soul almost left his body when he saw Jian Wushuang split half of the celestial prefecture. He stopped in mid-air, turned around, and returned to the Fusang tree. You want to leave? Stay here. Jian Wushuang shouted coldly and clenched his fist. The space collapsed immediately. Prince Mo, who was flying, suddenly staggered and rolled out. Jian Wushuang took advantage of the opening and caught up with him, suppressing him with one palm. The mountain rocks that rose up from the ground pinned him under the Fusang tree. Let me go! Prince Mo shouted in panic. I will give you whatever you want as long as you let me go. Jian Wushuang frowned and slapped him to shut him up. Then he reached out and touched Prince Mo's chest. However, he did not find what he was looking for. There was nothing in Prince Mo's arms. Not even half a piece of the heaven-patterned bone armor. Where's the thing I want? Jian Wushuang suppressed his killing intent and said coldly. Prince Mo's eyes were filled with fear. What kind of thing are you looking for? It's really in my arms. I've never thrown it away. Jian Wushuang saw that he did not look like he was going to speak, so he started searching again. However, the result was the same as before. He still could not find the heaven-patterned bone armor. You lied to me? Jian Wushuang's face was cold, and his raised palm was already bursting with killing intent. Prince Mo's face was ashen. He clearly remembered that after he had picked up the jade bone armor, he had kept it in his arms and never lost it. How could it have disappeared? Jian Wushuang did not intend to kill him. In this situation, he had not found what he needed, so he had to leave as soon as possible to avoid being affected. Just as he was about to leave after giving Prince Mo a memorable lesson, a deep and cold voice rang out from behind him. Brat, go to hell. Di Qing appeared behind Jian Wushuang quietly. Then, He stretched out a finger and pointed it at Jian Wushuang's back. Whiz! The black and white power of the finger blasted open his entire chest from his back without any resistance. The divine blood, yen power, and immortal source were all shattered at this moment. Jian Wushuang's pupils were dilated to the maximum. The indescribable pain and the blankness of his divine consciousness made him teetering, and then he fell into the void. Di Qing retracted his palm. A look of pity flashed across his face, and then he turned back. The entire process was almost completed in a breath's time. When Prince Mo came back to his senses, Jian Wushuang's shattered body had already died. I'm fine. He sat down under the Fusong tree and mumbled to himself. The entire Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture had turned into a complete mess. All the top cultivators and Yen immortals who were not affected had left long ago. As for the guards who were supposed to be the first to arrive, after seeing the terrifying scene of the Grand Yen Immortals battle, they all tacitly disappeared. The entire Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture was located in the northernmost heavenly region of the Great Sea region, which was quite a distance from the Heavenly Court. Therefore, everything that was happening in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture did not affect the other heavenly regions. On the broken ground that was still covered in black flames, there was a broken figure lying on the ground. There was nothing in front of his stomach. It was replaced by a big hole, and his immortal body was almost half broken. With such injuries, any other Yen immortal would have been dead. However, if one looked closely, they would find that this figure, which should have been dead, was filled with the exuberant vitality of a living being. His broken immortal body was also repairing rapidly. He had the undying and imperishable immortal body. Even if the immortal source was broken and the power was scattered, as long as there was a will left, it was enough to be rebuilt. At the same time, the injuries that would have killed any other Yen immortal were not even serious injuries to Jian Wushuang. With a slight movement of his fingers, his blank consciousness slowly recovered. Although the undying and imperishable immortal body was constantly recovering, the severe pain after the injury still affected him. Above the clouds, a huge battle was still happening. Extremely beautiful explosions were still happening. Jian Wushuang lay on the ground, hoping to recover quickly. At this moment, a pair of scarlet and white feet with silver bells attached to them quietly stepped on the ground that had been burned by the flames. It was as if the owner of the feet did not feel the heat at all. The dress that was hanging on the ground was melting, revealing the skin of her legs. Finally, the owner of the feet came to Jian Wushuang and slowly squatted down. At the same time, an ancient object full of cracks was placed in front of him. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed and his breathing became heavy. The piece of jade that entered his eyes was the heaven-patterned bone armor that he had been searching for all this time. The person holding the bone armor was none other than Lady Yinling, who had been by Prince Mo's side the entire time. Jian Wushuang subconsciously reached out to grab it, but Yinling suddenly retracted it. "Do you really need this thing?" Yinling waved the bone armor in her hand and looked at him playfully. Jian Wushuang, who had almost recovered, stood up from the ground and stared at her. "This thing is of no use to me, but it seems that you need it very much," Yinling said slowly. "I can give it to you, but you have to promise me one thing." "Speak." Jian Wushuang frowned. Yinling nodded. "The condition is simple. Take me out of here and never set foot here again." Jian Wushuang, who had no intention of carrying out the conditions of the exchange, nodded after hearing the simple requirements. "Sure, I agree." Yinling smiled, but when he reached out, she quickly stuffed the bone armor into her chest. "I can't give it to you now. If you change your mind at the last minute, I'll be the one in trouble," Yinling said seriously. "So I can only give it to you after I've left the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture completely." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang did not say much. Now that another heaven-patterned bone armor was in front of him, it saved him a lot of energy. At the same time, in the face of such a simple request, he could exchange it for a piece of bone armor, and there was no need to kill again. Although she might be a burden or an unstable factor, Jian Wushuang had already decided to take her away. He took out a few crystals from the Black Mountains and put them into his mouth, to quickly nourish his newly recovered meridians. He said, "Wait here for a while. I'll be back soon and come back to receive you later." Ling shook her head and said, "No, I'll go with you. There are too many variables now. It might be safer for me to follow you." Jian Wushuang had no choice but to ignore her and fly into the sky. Although he wanted to give Di Qing an eye for an eye, the gap between the two of them was too great. It was obviously unwise to seek revenge at this moment. Jian Wushuang took a deep look at Di Qing and prepared to grab Qingqing and Xianxia. At this moment, he glanced at the fusang tree from the corner of his eye. A ghostly figure quietly appeared behind the frightened Prince Mo. Perhaps he had sensed the strange aura behind him, but Prince Mo subconsciously turned his body. A cold light flashed, and the majestic yen power force directly crushed half of his body into powder. A blood-curdling scream resounded. "Master Di, save me." However, Di Qing was now entangled with the two grand yen immortals and could not get away, let alone rush to the rescue like before. If he had not subconsciously turned around, that sneak attack alone would have been enough to kill him. Half of Prince Mo's body was completely shattered. He collapsed under the fusang tree with an ashen face. The ghostly figure slowly walked in front of him, holding a true sword in his hand. The ghostly figure had a ferocious mask, but from the shape of the body, it was a woman. It was obvious that she was the one who had severely injured Prince Mo. As if sensing the danger of death, Prince Mo calmed down from his initial panic and began to fight back with all his might. He used his remaining arm to release a vast amount of yen power, which blasted toward the ghostly figure. However, the next moment, she instantly drew her sword and cut off Prince Mo's remaining arm. The ghostly figure did not want to talk nonsense. After cutting off his arm, she activated her vast yen power to destroy his immortal source. A sudden change occurred. Before the majestic force could touch Prince Mo's immortal source, it was suddenly cut off. Then, even the ghostly figure was trapped by a strange force. Di Qing again. He was simply too terrifying. With just a wave of his hand, he could easily trap a yen immortal. The ghostly figure clearly did not anticipate this. By the time she reacted, it was already too late. Di Qing grabbed her, obviously intending to crush her immortal source directly. At that moment, Jian Wushuang suddenly appeared with an invisible sword in his hand and cut off all the connections Di Qing had with the ghostly figure. Di Qing's eyes suddenly narrowed, as if he had seen something incredible. Obviously, he was very surprised that Jian Wushuang was still alive. However, he could no longer withdraw. Facing these two grand yen immortals who seemed vulnerable but were extremely difficult to deal with, he could not use his full strength, so he could only face them off like this. Because once Di Qing used an even more supreme power, his unique aura would inevitably spread throughout the entire Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. If the Heavenly Court really detected it, he would either have to surrender or die. Therefore, he could not use his full strength at all and could only hold on like this. Although Di Qing did not care about Prince Mo's life or death, he was still very generous with the Enlightenment Tao field and some other conditions. The true Crow's bloodline was formed from all living beings in the world, and no matter how the great Tao circulated, it was always the most ancient and top-tier existence. Di Qing, on the other hand, had already cultivated 9 true feathers. With one more, he would be able to comprehend the Emperor's fate energy and ascend to the throne. Therefore, he could not let anything happen to himself now. He could not let anything happen to Prince Mo, who had provided him with the training ground and resources. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other coldly, and Jian Wushuang retreated without fear as he clutched the ghostly woman. The ghostly figure's body struggled unnaturally, but after realizing that it was futile, she simply let him hold on. After returning to the huge fusang tree, Jian Wushuang slowly let out a breath of turbid air. After breaking free from Jian Wushuang's grasp, the ghostly figure with the mask came to Prince Mo with her sword. Perhaps it had experienced a series of fierce battles, but the mask band behind the ghostly figure's hair suddenly fell off, and the entire black gold mask fell off. Her fine black hair fell down, revealing a beautiful and delicate face that was a little pale. "It's you." When Jian Wushuang saw the extremely recognizable face, he subconsciously blurted out, "Zhang Ying." The woman with a beautiful and delicate face was the unconscious woman that Jian Wushuang had seen not long after he had defeated the giant sea-sky octopus when he had first arrived in the Great Yen domain and escorted the Black Mountain crystals together with Chun Qiu. When the ghostly figure heard the name Zhang Ying, her body trembled. She had not expected that someone would call out her name in a place like this. For a moment, the air fell into a state of dead silence. Jian Wushuang quickly understood why Zhang Ying looked so surprised. It was because he had transformed into an ordinary guard, which was completely different from his previous appearance. That was why Zhang Ying did not recognize him as Jian Wushuang from the Great Voyage. However, the time and place of their next meeting was a little strange. Why would this woman, who had disappeared quietly after the battle in the Whirling Heaven, suddenly appear in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture? Moreover, it seemed that she was here to kill Prince Mo. Could she be the messenger of one of the princes under Zhen Wuyang? Jian Wushuang was a little uncertain. He opened his mouth slightly, but nothing came out. Then he turned around and prepared to leave. At this moment, he suddenly felt a great danger behind him, causing him to turn his head. Then, a true sword wrapped in yen power almost brushed past his neck and stabbed forward, bringing up a trace of blood. If Jian Wushuang had not dodged in time, the sword would have been enough to cause serious damage to Jian Wushuang. After barely avoiding the danger, he turned to look at Zhang Ying, his eyes as dark as water. Zhang Ying's beautiful face was as cold as ice. She held the sword in her right hand and without saying a word, she slashed at Jian Wushuang again with yen power. "Are you sick?" Jian Wushuang's index and middle fingers caught the blade that was heading straight for his face. He suppressed his anger and said to Zhang Ying, "Do you really think I'm a pushover?" Zhang Ying's body froze again, and doubt appeared in her cold eyes. She could hear something familiar in the words of this young guard. However, in the next moment, an even colder killing intent burst out. From Zhang Ying's back, hundreds of boundless yen power suddenly appeared, and all of them suppressed Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was furious. He suddenly struck his palm forward and clashed with yen power. A wave of mighty explosions surged out from under the fusang tree. At the same time, Jian Wushuang pointed out his finger again, which turned into several water dragons and trapped Zhang Ying. He did not want to kill Zhang Ying. After all, she was one of the few people he had met when he first came to the Great Yen domain, so his only goal was to trap her. However, the more it was like this, the more intense Zhang Ying's resistance became. Her strength, which was stronger than that of an ordinary Yen immortal, gave Jian Wushuang a headache. "What do you want? Don't go overboard, Zhang Ying." Jian Wushuang looked at the woman in front of him and said in a deep voice. Zhang Ying, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. "How did you know my name?" Hearing this, Jian Wushuang fell silent. He realized that he could not reveal any information about himself. In the end, he pushed forward, forcing Zhang Ying away. "Don't care who I am. I'll give you a piece of advice. It's best if you don't kill Prince Mo." After saying that, Jian Wushuang obviously did not want to waste any more time and turned to leave. Looking at that familiar back, Zhang Ying did not chase after him. Instead, she turned around to look at Prince Mo, who was lying under the fusang tree, barely breathing. After several fights and escapees, Prince Mo had already gotten over it. There was only unwillingness left in his eyes. Under the battle between Diqing and Grand Yen Immortal, the entire small celestial prefecture and even the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture was on the verge of collapse. The old roots of the fusang tree had already broken, and broken stones were falling down. Zhang Ying walked forward and faced the setting sun. Without any hesitation, she cut off Prince Mo's head. Then, she stretched out her palm and released a vast amount of yen power, easily crushing his immortal source. He was the fifth prince under Zhen Wuyang, Prince Mo. Under the fusang tree, the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, which was supported by Prince Mo's fate energy, began to collapse. All the great Tao and fate energy were in chaos. Heaven and earth were in grief. This was a reaction to the death of an emperor. Zhang Ying, the one who brought about the termination, looked at the lifeless head in her hand and waved her hand to take the last bit of fate energy that belonged to Prince Mo. In the end, the head turned into a handful of fine powder and fell under the Fusang tree. The son of the emperor passed away, and the great Tao of heaven and earth trembled. At this moment, all the Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals who were fighting in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture had noticed this. Jian Wushuang turned around and took one last look at the figure standing under the Fusang tree with a complicated expression. Then he left quickly. Once Prince Mo died, all the Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals present would be thoroughly investigated by the Heavenly Court. If they left any clues, it would be a disaster. Jian Wushuang did not forget that other than Jin Wuyang, who had the Emperor's fate energy, there were still 99 Grand Yen Immortals in the entire Heavenly Court. Any one of them had the absolute strength to fight Di Qing alone. Therefore, escaping was the best choice. Chun Qing and Chun Xiu, who were fighting with all their might, felt their bodies relax. The mysterious 5 swordsmen stopped their attacks and shouted at the sky in unison. Prince Mo is dead. Retreat. Hearing this, the 2 Grand Yen Immortals with divine blood spots on their bodies immediately gave up their confrontation with Di Qing and prepared to escape. You want to run? All of you stay. Di Qing shouted angrily. He shook his arms and grabbed them. The 2 Grand Yen Immortals hurriedly circulated Yen Power's great force to resist. At the same time, they said in a deep voice, Prince Mo is dead, and the Heavenly Court will definitely investigate. If you don't leave now, you won't be able to leave later even if you want to. Di Qing smiled and said, We have plenty of time. It's not too late for me to leave after I kill you all. Brainless idiot. Unable to escape, the 2 Grand Yen Immortals were also anxious. The longer they stayed at this place, the less likely it was for them to escape. However, Di Qing did not let them leave, and they started fighting again. Chun Xiu, Chun Qing, let's go. With a deep roar, Jian Wushuang moved like lightning and broke through the 5 swordsmen's blockade with great momentum to help the 2. Chun Qing and Chun Xiu nodded their heads and the 3 of them quickly fled. Brother Jian, is Prince Mo really dead? Chun Qing could not help but ask while they were fleeing. He still could not believe that the 5th prince of Jinwuyang had died so easily. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. The fate energy has already dissipated. There's no possibility of survival. Chun Qing nodded. His eyes were filled with either joy or worry. Damn it. The fight was so rushed that I even forgot to pour a hot pee on the heavenly hall. Don't think too much. Let's escape from this place first. The Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture was extremely vast. But as the prince's fate energy dissipated, the great Tao became chaotic, and the entire Celestial Prefecture was irreversibly shattered. Jian Wushuang wanted to escape from the Celestial Prefecture with all his might and hide his aura as much as possible before the people from the Heavenly Court arrived. The current chaotic situation was exactly what he wanted. As long as he left the Celestial Prefecture, even the Emperor would not be able to detect that he had been here. Under the Fusang tree, Zhang Ying turned back to look at the figure that had already disappeared into the distance. She seemed to have understood a little. After a few breaths, just as the Fusang tree completely collapsed, her figure also disappeared quietly. Brother Jian will be able to leave the Celestial Prefecture in half a day at most. Have you found the thing you need? Chun Qing asked. Jian Wushuang did not speak but looked at Yin Ling, who was following him closely. Don't worry. As long as we get out of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, I'll give you what you want immediately. Yin Ling patted her chest and proudly smiled. Jian Wushuang's face stiffened and he turned his head to the side. Seeing this, Chun Qing and Chun Xiu both had strange expressions. Isn't this woman Prince Mo's woman? Chun Qing's expression was somewhat startled. Hearing this, Yin Ling sniffed. Hey, silly big guy. Which eye of yours saw that I'm Prince Mo's woman? I was merely imprisoned by his side. Now that he's dead, I'm free. Chun Qing pouted, but did not say anything, for completely hidden figures were rapidly leaving. However, in the next moment Jian Wushuang felt great danger. As if to confirm his thoughts, the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, which had been plunged into crimson and darkness, began to be illuminated by a white gold light. Then, just as Jian Wushuang and the others were about to step out of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, an invisible and hazy barrier appeared outside the boundary of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. This is bad. Jian Wushuang's heart sank and he felt a chill. When Chongqing and the others saw this, their hearts also sank to the bottom. The entire shattered Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture had been sealed off by an external force. Only those existences could seal the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture with such a powerful force. Even Grand Yen Immortals could not do it. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with solemnness and bitterness. Brother Jian, what should we do? Should we force our way out? Chun Qing said in a serious tone as a ruthless glint appeared in his eyes. Jian Wushuang shook his head. From now on, we can't use yen power. This barrier is definitely not something we can break through. Let's just wait and see. After saying this, he brought the three of them to land directly in a shattered Immortal Estate pavilion and concealed all of his aura. In the broken sky, hundreds of millions of white gold light beams shot up into the sky. At the same time, more than a dozen elders with light wheels of various colors on their backs were approaching on clouds. Di Qing, who was still fighting in the sky, also noticed this scene. Damned fool! Just wait for your death. One of the Grand Yen Immortals fighting Di Qing shouted in anger, wishing he could tear Di Qing apart. Di Qing retracted his palm and looked at the old men standing in the clouds, a great fear flashing through his eyes. The two Grand Yen Immortals looked at each other. Then they suddenly fled to the left and right. Evil creature! One of the elders with a black light wheel on his back raised his palm and pressed down. Even though they were millions of miles away, he still captured a Grand Yen Immortal who was escaping. At the same time, an old man with a scarlet wheel of light on his back took out a palm-sized porcelain bottle and directly absorbed another Grand Yen Immortal. In the blink of an eye, the two escaping Grand Yen Immortals were both caught. Then, the old man with the black light wheel used his great divine ability to squeeze the two Grand Yen Immortals into the size of pellets. The fifth young lord? Did you kill him? The majestic sound of a great bell reverberated throughout the celestial prefecture. The two Grand Yen Immortals, who were originally insufferably arrogant, were now scared out of their wits. This was because they saw an ordinary-looking old man in a black robe slowly walking over. This old man was Uncle Yu, the most mysterious elder behind Emperor Zhen Wuyang. It's none of our business. We're just passing by. We didn't kill the fifth prince. He was killed by someone else. They still wanted to say something, but the black-robed old man just waved his hand at them, and their divine souls and immortal sources were completely destroyed. What kind of terrifying strength was this, to destroy a Grand Yen Immortal without even releasing yen power? His wrinkled face seemed to contain all the vicissitudes of life and secrets of the world. Finally, he looked at Di Qing not far away with his turbid eyes. Di Qing slowly took half a step back and stared at him. The fifth prince? Did you kill him? A hoarse voice came. Uncle Yu's eyes were so calm that they seemed to have stopped time. Even the proud Di Qing had to lower his head at this moment. No, and it's impossible for him to be killed by me. He was killed by his accomplices. A woman personally cut off young Master Mo's head and destroyed his immortal source. Di Qing pointed at the 5 swordsmen in the distance and said in a deep voice. Uncle Yu's face was expressionless. He slowly reached out his hand from his sleeve and clenched his fist in the air. As he grabbed, the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, which was already on the verge of destruction, shattered even faster. Whether it was immortal mansions, pavilions, or thousands of living beings, they were all inevitably turned into fine powder. Since that's the case, all of you will be buried with the fifth prince. Gu Ji's old voice resounded. Uncle Yu's voice was like the great Tao, which caused the irreversible defeat of the entire Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Di Qing's pupils suddenly narrowed, and he took a few steps back as he said, What do you mean? I've already told you the real murderer. Why don't you let me go? The death of the fifth prince is related to the entire Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Naturally, all of you will be buried with him. Uncle Yu's voice was indifferent and unquestionable. Di Di Qing's face turned livid. Do you think you can defeat me like this? If I leave, no one will be able to stop me. With that, a huge golden crow image bloomed behind Di Qing, and his whole body was filled with a faint majesty. Facing a dozen grand yen immortals with light wheels on their backs and the unfathomable Uncle Yu, he chose to fight. However, before the battle even began, Uncle Yu pointed his finger at Di Qing. A dark beam of light pierced through the void, tore Di Qing's golden crow form apart, and easily shattered his immortal source. Deathly silence. An extreme deathly silence. Di Qing, who was arrogant enough to fight against two people alone, had his immortal source shattered just like that. The shattering of the immortal source meant irreversible damage, and it symbolized a yen immortal's final death sentence. Di Qing died just like that. Thousands of feathers were stripped from his body and scattered in the void. Then, his body plunged into the shattered celestial prefecture. After killing Di Qing, Uncle Yu raised his arms again. Under his control, the entire northern heaven celestial prefecture was crushed into powder. Even yen immortals would not be able to survive. With the death of the fifth prince, the trillions of living beings in the entire celestial prefecture had also been buried with him. No top cultivator or yen immortal could escape from Uncle Yu's Dao. However, there should be an exception to everything. As the entire northern heaven celestial prefecture was completely crushed into dust, trillions of living beings were buried with it. Then, Uncle Yu returned to the heavenly court with the group of elders. He came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Everything seemed to have been erased, as if it had never existed. The thick and heavy dust was devoured and absorbed by the astral winds in the universe. The heavenly region that originally belonged to the northern heaven celestial prefecture had been wiped out and replaced by nothingness. It might have to go through millions of reincarnations in the galaxy before a new heavenly region could be born. In the starry sky, as the dust fell, there were a few faint auras. Brothers, we're going to be rich this time. Who has ever seen a crystal with such dense and pure yen power? Oh my God. This is dozens, no, hundreds of times denser in yen power. I didn't expect that we could find such a treasure in such a remote desert. We should be rich. No, here, why is there a pair of legs? In the yellow sand that covered the sky, there were nearly 50 men in thick and long clothes. They were swallowing their saliva as they looked at the black crystal that was as tall as a small mountain. Furthermore, the cultivation of these men was not weak. They were all ancestor realm cultivators. At this time, the two men closest to the black crystal saw a leg under the crystal and directly pulled it out. Whoosh! As the black crystal collapsed and flowed, the owner of the legs finally appeared. "B-boss, it's a man!" The man with the full beard could not help but shout after seeing the figure clearly. "What's all the noise? Haven't you seen a man before?" One of the pale-faced men glared at him, then looked at the unconscious man and gasped. At this moment, the clothes on the upper body of the man who was unconscious in the black mountain crystal had been torn apart, revealing his well-proportioned body. At the same time, his exposed skin was extremely red, as if it had been soaked in blood. On his chest, there was a fire phoenix spreading its wings and chirping, as if it could break free at any time and rush into the clouds. When he first saw the unconscious man, the pale-faced man felt a great sense of danger. His intuition, which had been used to escaping death several times, told him that this man was definitely a terrifying existence. "Boss, there are people here too," the full-bearded man shouted again while pointing at the other leg buried in the black crystal. "Boss, what should we do?" The subordinate, who had also noticed something was amiss, asked in a deep voice, a hint of ruthlessness in his eyes. The pale-faced man did not hesitate. He immediately narrowed his eyes and said, "Kill them all while they are unconscious. Don't leave a single one alive." All the top cultivators received the order and rushed forward. They controlled their respective yen power and prepared to kill. However, at this moment, an earth-shattering sound suddenly rang out. Then, countless powerful forces turned into a dense net and descended. Before the pale-faced man's subordinates could react, more than 10 top cultivators were killed by yen power who descended from the sky. "Not good, boss. Those guys from the Sand Demon Cave are here, the full-bearded man cried out in shock. However, before he could reach the pale-faced man, Yen Power, who had descended from the sky, pierced through his life source. Blood splattered on his face. A violent sandstorm swept up from the ground, accompanied by a terrifying strong wind. Hundreds of lazy figures approached from afar. "Boss, let's retreat. We're far from being their match." The corners of the white-faced man's eyes twitched. He was clearly unwilling to accept this. This black crystal, which was hundreds or even thousands of times more precious than sky crystals, was already in his bag. But now he was giving it away. How could he do it? However, it was only when the figures riding on the yellow sand got closer and closer that the pale-faced man finally waved his hand unwillingly. "Retreat!" Before he retreated, he stretched out his hand again and grabbed nearly 1,000 black mountain crystals before he quickly escaped. What bad luck! This group of bastards actually dared to find food in our territory. They're simply tired of living. The yellow sand dissipated, and the hundreds of figures gradually emerged. At the very front of these figures was a young man in casual clothes. He looked at the figures that were flying away and spat on the ground in disdain. "Brothers, hurry up and move it. Whoever leaves a piece behind will be hung on the city gate for 10 days. The unrestrained young man's face was full of dissatisfaction. As he waved his hand, the 100 men behind him all flew to the small mountain of crystals and began to move them. Waving his hand to take a black crystal, the unrestrained young man raised his eyebrows and smiled. "That's really not bad. This time I'll give all of them to Big Sister." "Another great merit. Commander Chui, there are a few people under these crystals," a man responded. At the same time, he dragged out the bodies that were either buried under the crystals or in the yellow sand. There were a total of 6 figures, 5 men and 1 woman. When the unrestrained young man, who was called Commander Chui, saw the unconscious woman, his eyes could not help but brighten. Even though her figure was in a sorry state, the yellow sand could not hide her gentle and beautiful figure. "Commander Chui, their identities are unknown. It's best to avoid contact with them." The middle-aged man beside the unrestrained young man pulled him back in time and reminded him in a calm voice. "I don't need you to remind me. I just want to check if they're pretending to be unconscious to prevent any unnecessary situations from happening." The unrestrained young man shook off the middle-aged man's hand and took a step forward, pretending to investigate. With one look, he also saw some clues. The 5 men and 1 woman, the 6 figures, had all suffered extremely heavy injuries. Could be said that they were on the verge of death. There was a tall middle-aged man in tattered black and gold clothes. His entire chest had been torn apart by some terrifying force. Moreover, from the clothing of these people, they all had a faint sense of authority. The most important thing was that he could not see through the strength and realm of these people. Where did these suspicious guys come from? Why do they give me such a strong sense of deterrence? The young man rubbed his chin and muttered, "Commander Chui, what should we do with these unconscious people?" The middle-aged man reminded. Hearing this, the young man stopped thinking and waved his hand. "Who cares? As long as we find it, it's ours. Carry it all into the city. Don't leave a single strand of hair behind." Between heaven and earth, the vast yellow sand became the only main color. Due to the shaking and jolting, he was forced to slowly open his eyes from the pain. A wisp of pure red light flickered in the depths of his eyes, and the star between his brows also began to slowly rotate. However, the gathered forces only existed for a moment before they dissipated. The pain came from the overwhelming pain of his divine sense. Whether it was the divine sense, the immortal source, or the undying and imperishable immortal body, they had all been destroyed in the destruction of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. In the final process of destruction, he used his immortal body to absorb more than half of the destruction aura to protect Changqing, Chun Xiu, and Yinling Jian Wushuang was almost crushed by the great momentum. Without the ancestral phoenix blood that Feng Qi had left in his body, even with the characteristics of a perfect chaotic life form, it would be enough to make Jian Wushuang fall into a long sleep. Feeling the ancestral phoenix blood in his body gradually dimming, He knew that after one more time, the divine blood feng qi left in his body would completely disappear. Besides his eyes, Jian Wushuang's other body parts were in a chaotic state that he could not control. He endured the pain of his consciousness being shattered and then fused as he looked around him and in front of him. In the sandstorm, the team of hundreds of people slowly moved forward, their destination unknown. He wanted to move, but he found himself tied up like a dumpling by a unique chain. He was lying on the mountain of black mountain crystals and could not move at all. Beside Jian Wushuang, Chen Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others were all wrapped like rice dumplings. They were still unconscious and had no idea where they were. Jian Wushuang struggled to get up, but the intense pain from every cell made him hold on for a moment before he passed out again. When he closed his eyes, he saw a huge black door appear in the yellow sand. Ah! With a slight groan, Jian Wushuang woke up from his initial unconsciousness. Cold sweat poured out from his temples. Although he had recovered, he had only recovered 10% at most. He could barely mobilize his yen power. This was the most serious injury he had suffered since he came to the great yen domain. Even his undying and imperishable immortal body was almost shattered. Because of this, Jian Wushuang realized Uncle Yu's terrifying power. With a wave of his hand, he annihilated 2 grand yen immortals and shattered Di Qing's immortal source with a finger. How terrifying was he? Could it be that he was a supreme almighty on the same level as Emperor Zhen Wuyang? There was no answer. The only thing Jian Wushuang could think of was that they had escaped from Uncle Yu. The cause of Prince Mo's death would be completely buried. At least they would not be found out. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of turbid breath, Jian Wushuang was shocked to realize that his current situation was not optimistic, could even be described as terrible. Jian Wushuang was tied up by a rope and hung high on the city wall. He was not the only one. The unconscious Chang Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others were all lined up beside him, hanging on the city wall without exception. It was unknown what this city wall was made of, but on the pitch-black wall, thick bone spikes were exposed, making it look extremely hideous. In addition, the red clouds formed by the resentment and blood qi in the sky were almost solid. How many killings did they have to do to have such a scene? Jian Wushuang had a headache. Ever since he entered the great yen domain, he had been in a passive situation. He had only managed to escape with his life from the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, and now he had fallen into such a state. As he had not recovered from his injuries, he could not even use yen power as he wished. He could not do anything about the rope on his body, so he could only be hung on the city wall. Then Jian Wushuang looked to his side. Although Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others were injured to varying degrees, they were far from fatal. Their breathing was stable. When he looked to the right, he was shocked. Di Qing, who had been killed by Uncle Yu on the spot and had his immortal source crushed, was now hanging beside Jian Wushuang in the same posture. Although his aura was barely audible, he was actually alive. Di Qing was not dead, which was not good news, but a big threat to him. Jian Wushuang had already started to think about how to kill him. Di Qing was not the only one. A figure in broken armor was also hanging on the city wall. Jian Wushuang could clearly see that the figure in the broken armor was the young guard who had held him hostage earlier, one of the 7 swordsmen. Among these figures, only the most important one was missing Yin Ling, who AHD the heaven pattern bone armor. Even at the last moment before the celestial prefecture was destroyed, Jian Wushuang had taken Yin Ling's existence into consideration and protected her. It was impossible for her to die. Now that she had disappeared, there was only one possibility. She had been taken away by the people of this evil city. At this moment, Chang Qing and Chun Qiu gradually woke up. They looked around in a daze, but they were speechless. What is this place? Have we escaped from the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture? Chun Qing said in a daze. Then he saw Jian Wushuang, and his eyes lit up. Brother Jian, we didn't die? Of course we're not dead, Chun Qiu muttered. He was extremely weak, but I'm not far from death. It's good that you've escaped. This time we can be considered to have lived together. Wait a minute. Isn't our current location a little strange? Who the fuck hung us on the city wall? Changqing was surprised. He tried to twist his body to break free, but found that he could not even use a bit of strength. Jian Wushuang spoke in a timely manner. Don't waste your energy. Recover well. I think the people who captured us will be out soon. As his voice fell, the dust-covered city gate slowly opened, and a faint smell of blood wafted out. Jian Wushuang could not help but frown. It seemed that this heavenly region was just as he had guessed, filled with bloodlust. As the city gate slowly opened, a team of 8 people walked out. In the middle of the group, there were 4 people carrying a soft bed on their shoulders. On the soft bed, there was a young man with disheveled clothes and a loose body. Needless to say, it must be this bunch of bastards who tied us up. Changqing's face was ashen, and he wanted to go down and draw their blood on the spot. Chun Qiu's expression changed as well. He muttered, "Oh no, my storage ring is missing." The interspatial ring was given to Jian Wushuang by the young emperor when they left the 6 Heavens realm. The amount of Black Mountain Peak crystals stored in it was terrifying. The apex crystals inside was enough to make the top cultivators in a heavenly domain fight for it. Losing it now was an incalculable loss. It must have been taken by those bastards who trapped us. When I recover, I'll crush them. Changqing gritted his teeth and said. However, he was severely injured. He probably would not be able to fight back against an ancestor-level cultivator. As if he had just woken up from a dream, the unrestrained young man lying on the soft bed looked up at the few people on the city wall. "Oh, you've finally woken up after hanging for more than 10 days. You've really made me wait for a long time." As he spoke, he took out a black crystal the length of a finger from his bosom and rubbed it in his hand with a disdainful look. Changqing was beyond furious. He looked at the unrestrained youth in front of him, who was only an ancestor realm cultivator, and said angrily, "It's fine if you bastards stole my things, but now you dare to mock me? Do you believe that I won't exterminate you all?" Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's heart sank. In the current situation, they had not recovered their strength at all. It was impossible for them to deal with an ancestor realm expert. If they were to capsize here, they would really be doomed. As expected, after hearing Changqing's shout, the unrestrained young man, who originally had a face that was asking for a beating, suddenly jumped up from the soft bed. His eyes were filled with killing intent. "Old thing, who are you calling a thief? Do you believe that I will pull out the root of your tongue?" When Changqing heard this, he laughed disdainfully and spat at him. "Even while I'm hanging here, don't even think about hurting me." The unrestrained youth did not say much. He immediately pulled out a true sword from his attendant's waist and stepped on the air to stab Changqing. Jian Wushuang was not worried. Even if Changqing's strength had not recovered, his body was a true immortal body, which could not be destroyed by Yen immortals. This self-proclaimed commander was only at the ancestor realm. With the ordinary metal in his hand, the damage he could cause to Changqing was naturally limited. Sure enough, the sword struck out and stabbed toward Changqing's chest, but it could not advance an inch. It did not even pierce his clothes. Seeing this, the unrestrained young man's body trembled, and the arrogance in his eyes diminished a bit. "Get lost. A brat who hasn't even grown his hair yet dares to make a move on Master Chan?" Changqing said coldly. At the same time, he spat out a mouthful of saliva. As the distance was too close, the unrestrained young man was caught off guard and his face was covered in saliva. "Arg! I'm going to kill you." The unrestrained young man, who had recovered from his shock, was furious. He raised his true sword and madly slashed at Changqing. Under such a crazy attack, although Changqing had the appearance of an immortal, he was already somewhat unable to withstand it due to the heavy injuries he had suffered. "Enough, kid. I'm not a sandbag." Changqing tried to dodge as he furiously shouted. There was only anger left in the eyes of the unrestrained young man as he aimed his sword at the fatal spot. At this moment, a cold and ethereal female voice rang out from all directions. "Cui Jing, stop and bring them to me." Jian Wushuang looked up at the red sky that was formed by killing and evil thoughts. He could vaguely see an aura gathering in the city. After the unrestrained youth named Cui Jing heard that voice, although he hated Changqing to the core, he also stopped. He turned around with his sword in hand and gave orders to the attendants he had brought. Before long, Jian Wushuang and the others were all led down from the city wall. The young guard, who had been unconscious, had woken up long ago. He looked at Jian Wushuang with an undisguised cold-killing intent. Jian Wushuang ignored his gaze and looked at Di Qing, who had just woken up from his near-death state. The power that could destroy an ordinary Yen immortal thousands of times did not kill him completely. However, judging from his dispirited aura after he woke up, he had suffered more serious injuries than Jian Wushuang. In this way, Jian Wushuang did not have to worry that Di Qing would hurt him. After all, a bird whose beak was temporarily removed could not cause much damage. Under the lead of the unrestrained young man Cui Jing, the group of 5, like prisoners, entered the evil city with ropes connected to each other. The yellow sand rolled up. In this big city that was filled with brutal killing intent and evil thoughts, the ground was covered with thick sand and stones. This evil city was completely situated on a desolate desert. After entering the city gate, Jian Wushuang noticed the scene inside the city. Such a big city was quite similar to a stockade village. It was crisscrossed with different houses stacked on top of each other, as if there were fiendish gods living inside. As outsiders stepped in, top cultivators who were covered in evil killing intent began to gather. "Get away from me! These people are all here to be offered to Lady Xia. If they are stained by your killing intent, I'll beat you to death." Lying on the soft bed, Cui Jing pretended to be fierce and warned the top cultivators who came forward. After hearing Cui Jing's warning, more and more top cultivators gathered and retreated tactfully. However, there were still some top cultivators who did not want to leave. They rubbed their hands and said, "After you're done, can you give us some blood and bones?" Cui Jing hung his head from the soft bed again and said impatiently, "Do you think it's your turn? All of you, go back to the blood sea and cultivate." The top cultivators who had surrounded him sighed and then began to disperse. No one actually bumped into Cui Jing. Obviously, Cui Jing had some influence in the evil city called the Sand Demon Cave. However, Cheng Qing only sneered in disdain and said, "That piece of trash lying on the soft bed. Hurry up and let Master Chun sleep on it for a while. If you neglect us, be careful that we don't destroy your nest." Holding back Cheng Qing's rudeness, Cui Jing looked at him and said fiercely, "Old man, bark now while you still can. When I pull out your tendons and take out your bones, you'll die. A bunch of trash. What do I have to fear?" Cheng Qing was disdainful and completely treated Cui Jing's words as farts. Cui Jing did not say anything more. He could only avoid this guy who he was helpless against and was like a pain in the ass. Just like that, the group of 5 slowly walked forward in the evil city. When the evil cities that emitted a turbid aura gradually disappeared, a wide black stone road appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. At the end of this black stone avenue, which could accommodate 10 galloping horses side by side, was a great hall that bordered the crimson sky. At the same time, a series of illusory yet real screams sounded. Jian Wushuang looked forward and saw that the black road under his feet continued to extend forward. The rough sand and stone land had disappeared, and what replaced it was a boundless dark red blood sea. The great hall, which was connected to the sky, was located above the blood sea. At the same time, the soul-stirring howls were all coming from the crimson blood sea. Looking from afar, the black stone path, the giant hall, and the blood sea with the whales formed a terrifying purgatory. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg. Cui Jing also jumped off the soft bed after stepping into the area of the ancient hall and walked forward with a respectful expression. Hearing the heart-wrenching screams, Jian Wushuang remained calm, as if he was not affected at all. As for Cheng Qing and the others, their faces were also indifferent and they did not care. To be able to reach the Yen Immortal stage, which cultivator had not destroyed a heavenly region and living beings for various reasons or starting points, and the current situation naturally could not affect their state of mind. The further he went, the more Jian Wushuang realized where the wails and howls were coming from. The blood sea under his feet was formed by the condensation and transformation of the ownerless divine souls of countless creatures that had been captured. They were constantly being refined and could not be freed. Yen immortals were disdainful of such evil karma that exceeded killing. Only Yen immortals who cultivated evil arts would do so. Jian Wushuang gave the owner of the Sand Demon Cave a bad label in his heart. Under Cui Jing's guidance, the dust-covered door of the giant hall slowly opened, and blood qi gushed out of the hall. "Bring them in." After Cui Jing gave his orders, he was the first to enter the giant hall. Jian Wushuang and the others were also pushed in by a few followers. The hall was cold, and the entire floor was made of some kind of almost transparent crystal. One could directly see the deformed ghosts in the blood sea. There were not many auras hidden in the giant hall that was almost completely dark. Only deep within the hall was there a powerful aura. "Lady Xia, I've brought them all." Cui Jing put away his uncouth appearance and said with some respect. With a whoosh sound, a ghostly flame appeared and lit up the hall. As the hall was lit up, the big pile of black mountain crystals almost filled the entire back hall. Jian Wushuang's eyes locked on to the front immediately. From there, a tall figure in a large cloak slowly walked down from a cold chair. Her good figure was faintly discernible, and as she walked, it seemed as if it could be revealed at any time. At the same time, there were yellow sand particles moving in her hair. His deep-set facial features were cold as he slowly scanned Jian Wushuang and the others. Finally, she asked, "These crystals were all left behind by you?" No one spoke, as if she had already anticipated this. She opened her palm again to reveal a storage ring that was shimmering with a jet-black luster. "From what I've seen, the crystals in this ring have been piled up to a terrifying extent. Are you sure no one wants to claim them?" As her voice fell, a calm voice was heard. "That ring is mine." When their eyes met, the woman called Lady Xia raised her eyebrows and smiled. "What a generous gift. Why don't you give me these things that are more precious than sky crystals?" "You wish. Do you know how much the things inside are worth?" Chang Qing sneered. "I can even buy the 10 heavenly regions." When Lady Xia heard this, she asked again, "You guys are not cultivators from this heavenly region? I can give you the items as long as you let the 3 of us leave," Jian Wushuang said. "I think the value of these items can be used to exchange for our freedom. I also want the items, but I don't want to let you go. What should I do?" Lady Xia smiled slyly. Jian Wushuang remained silent. The palm behind his back was ready to open the boyang bottle at any time. "Do you really think you can defeat us? I don't intend to fight you all. After all, you have brought me such rich resources. Of course, I can let you go, but there's one condition," said Lady Xia as she stared at Jian Wushuang. "Send one person to compete with Cui Jing. If you win, you can leave. If you lose, you will naturally have to suffer the pain of having your soul taken away." After she finished speaking, she looked at Cui Jing. "Choose anyone. I only want to win." Cui Jing nodded, then turned to look at the 5 people standing side by side. Although he could not see through the cultivation realms of these 5 people, he could be sure that they were all extremely weak at the moment. Cui Jing first eliminated Chun Qing from his mind. After all, this seemingly troublesome fellow had left a big shadow in his heart. Then he eliminated Di Qing, whose eyes were filled with killing intent, and the young guard in turn. Finally, Cui Jing's eyes fell on Chun Qiu and Jian Wushuang. A drop of cold sweat trickled down from Chun Qiu's sideburns. He was only at ancestor level, and after being severely injured, his strength was almost reduced to the lowest. If he was chosen by Cui Jing, there was no possibility of winning. As for Cui Jing, he did not think too much about it. He pointed at Jian Wushuang and said, "Okay, you're the one. Come and have a match with me. As the saying goes, pick the soft persimmons and pinch them." This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. From Cui Jing's point of view, this guy was some clan's eldest son, who was obviously pampered since he was young. He must have been piled up with heavenly materials and precious treasures to put on a show. It was simply an easy thing to win against him. At this moment, Chang Qing and Chun Qiu both had strange expressions on their faces, as if they had already predicted the outcome. The rope that bound Jian Wushuang's body was released, and his movements were no longer restricted. "Brother Jian, don't hold back later. It's best to just kill him," Changqing said exultantly, as if he could not wait. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. Since he did not have a suitable weapon, he pulled out the true sword from Changqing's waist and then floated forward. Although only less than 10% of his strength and yen power had recovered, and his undying and imperishable immortal body was severely injured, he could still use the sword skillfully. In the Divine Power Universe's Cloud Palace, he had sparred with Sword Immortal Ding Bai for more than 100,000 years, which had laid a solid foundation for his sword Dao. Even if he used grass and tree branches to make a sword, he could unleash 100% of the sword Dao's power. Now he was standing in the same place like a rock. He slowly adjusted his breathing and began to try to resonate with the true sword. Cui Jing, who was standing opposite him, had returned to his carefree self. In his opinion, this competition would end in at most 10 breaths. Slowly focusing his eyes, Jian Wushuang gathered all the yen power in his meridians and suddenly reached out with the true sword in his hand. Cui Jing lowered his eyebrows and smiled. From between his arms, several frightening dragons formed by yen power began to gather. The battle started at once. At this moment, Di Qing was very unhappy, and his pale golden eyes were filled with killing intent. The feeling of having his fate in the hands of others was what he hated the most. But now he was helpless. Di Qing underestimated Uncle Yu's strike, which was why he was in such a situation. He had indeed died once in Uncle Yu's hands. However, no one knew that this life was just one of his 9 lives. However, even if he was spared from death, he could not escape punishment. The pain after his rebirth overshadowed everything. Di Qing did not even have the ability to protect himself. Even if he faced some top cultivators, he had no chance of winning. Therefore, he hated the feeling of having his fate in the hands of others. If Jian Wushuang was defeated, they would all die with him. Di Qing's heart, which was originally calm, was a little nervous. He could barely use 10% of yen power, which was indeed a little troublesome for Jian Wushuang. However, with sword intent it was more than enough to deal with Cui Jing. A yen power dragon appeared between Cui Jing's arms. Then he pushed his fists forward. There were a total of 4 dark yellow dragons, and they were hundreds of feet tall. Their mouths were full of sharp teeth, and if one was bitten by them, one would definitely be severely injured. Seeing this, Chun Qing and the others, who had been confident of winning, became a little nervous. After all, Jian Wushuang was the most seriously injured and had not recovered at all. For dragons with thick blood qi seemed to have walked out of the blood sea and swept forward. Jian Wushuang moved. He suddenly took half a step back and stretched his true sword forward. The tip of the sword let out a clear sound. At the same time, layers of water ripples surged out from the tip of the sword, blocking the blood qi that was surging over. However, this level of sword intent was no longer able to stop Cui Jing's attack. A few dark yellow dragons tore the ripples apart and opened their mouths full of strange teeth to bite Jian Wushuang. However, when Jian Wushuang retreated, he did not stop. Instead, he turned around and ran away with his sword in hand. He did not seem to be prepared for a confrontation. Seeing this scene, everyone's brows twitched, and their expressions became strange. Although it was understandable to avoid the sharp edge, it was too inelegant to turn around and run. Cui Jing was even more excited when he saw this. His originally cautious and serious gaze also began to become disdainful. It seemed that he had picked the right person to be a pushover. A total of 4 dark yellow dragons could not swallow Jian Wushuang and were destroyed after hitting the ground. Cui Jing stepped forward. An 8-foot stick condensed from yen power in his right hand, and he swung it forward. Jian Wushuang, who was running with his sword in hand, started to circle around the pillars. "You rat! Hurry up and fight your grandpa Cui!" Cui Jing laughed sinisterly as he smashed a hole in the pillar with his rod. Jian Wushuang did not care about him and did not seem to have any intention of fighting him. Just like that, the two of them began to chase each other in the ancient hall. Chun Qing and the others all broke out in cold sweat, and Di Qing was even more nervous. He did not want to die on the spot after the true life reincarnation. However, The young guard looked at Jian Wushuang with hatred, as if he wanted him to be captured and killed on the spot. "Damn you! I hate that I can't kill you with my own hands now," the young guard said in a low voice. "When I recover, it will be the day of your death." Sitting back on the throne, Lady Xia looked at the farce-like fight with calm eyes without saying a word. In her right palm was a scepter that was wrapped in a faint blood qi. At the very top of the scepter was a skull. The skull was lustrous and was constantly soaked in blood qi, as if it could grow flesh and blood at any time and come to life. For a woman like her who had a great killing tribulation, the karma she had was quite terrifying. Even ordinary Yen immortals would not be willing to come into contact with her. Furthermore, the top cultivators under her command were also extremely depraved. They loved to kill innocent living beings and had long been immersed in karma and great killing tribulations that could not be erased. The so-called Great Killing Tribulation was a mysterious cause and effect that no one could detect and was almost impossible to eliminate. When one was burdened with a Great Killing Tribulation, it meant that a crack would appear in one's heart. This was fatal to Yen immortals and could not be touched. Jian Wushuang had noticed this the moment he stepped into the Sand Demon Cave. Therefore, he was restraining himself and trying his best not to be contaminated by this karma. Cui Jing followed closely behind, eager to win. From time to time, Jian Wushuang would turn around and exchange a few blows. Then, he would continue to wander around, provoking Cui Jing's anger bit by bit. "Rat, when I catch you, I'll definitely drown you in a sea of blood." He was furious. Although he had adjusted his yen power to its peak, it was like hitting cotton, and he had no way to start. Jian Wushuang did not listen to the noise at all. When Cui Jing ran over with the 8-foot stick in his hand, he suddenly raised his sword and struck backward, directly leaving a long mark on the clothes in front of his chest. Although Cui Jing was prepared, he did not manage to dodge in time and was almost injured by the true sword. He broke out in a cold sweat and became even angrier. He released yen power and smashed it at Jian Wushuang. The entire ancient hall trembled, and a huge pillar was shattered by Cui Jing. Jian Wushuang's body flashed, and he finally attacked him in an extremely subtle way. The true sword in his hand hummed and gave off thousands of sword intents as it slashed out. In fact, the fundamental reason why Jian Wushuang had not made a move was to be careful not to be infected with the inexplicable karma. Although the Great Killing Tribulation on Cui Jing was much less than the other top cultivators in the Sand Demon Cave, it was still strong. Once infected by the Great Killing Tribulation, unless there was an unparalleled magical power to resolve it, it would only get worse. Jian Wushuang was at his weakest at the moment. If he took a wrong step, it would be difficult to turn around. Now that he had no way to avoid it, he directly attacked. 3,000 sword intents swept out and slashed at Cui Jing with great momentum. Cui Jing saw this and smiled disdainfully. He stretched out his hand and formed a defensive barrier to block it. At the same time, he pressed on Jian Wushuang without losing any momentum. He stood on the spot, his black robe fluttering without any wind, his expression calm. Soon, Cui Jing, who was running over, felt a sense of panic for no reason. He could vaguely sense that something was wrong. As if to confirm the thoughts in his heart, 3,000 sword intents swept out in an instant. They seemed to be vulnerable, but they easily tore through Cui Jing's yen power barrier and then slashed down. He was horrified and protected his head without thinking. Dust swirled up in the hall, and the top cultivators standing on both sides were all shocked. This level of sword intent was so pure that it did not contain any derivative force, but it had an invulnerable momentum. They felt that no one could resist this sword move. The sword intent surged and completely wrapped around Cui Jing. At this moment, Di Qing looked at Jian Wushuang with a meaningful look. Sitting on the throne, Lady Xia also raised her eyebrows and looked at him. The 3,000 sword intents came and left quickly. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. When the sword intent completely dissipated, a ragged figure appeared. These 3,000 sword intents had completely exposed Cui Jing. He was unscathed, but his clothes were torn to barely cover his body. This was a great humiliation that he could not bear. It was something that he, the great commander of the Sand Demon Cave, could not bear. In this sand demon cave, reputation was far more important than life. Moreover, he was a commander who thought he had a reputation. Cui Jing was furious. He growled and flew toward Jian Wushuang again. This time, he did not dodge and fought with his sword. Jian Wushuang, who had already mastered his sword intent, was confident that as long as Cui Jing did not purposely seek death, he would not be hurt at all. The more they fought, the more shocked Cui Jing became. Although he was eager to win, he was not a reckless person. How could he not notice that Jian Wushuang, who was fighting with him, did not use yen power at all? He was only relying on a true sword to fight back and forth. What kind of strength did he have to be able to do this? The true sword stabbed continuously, forcing Cui Jing to retreat step by step. At the same time, Jian Wushuang suddenly bent over, changed the sword hilt, and suddenly whipped the body of the true sword on Cui Jing's body. There was a sharp pain in his stomach, and then Cui Jing's whole body flew out and fell heavily on the ground. All of a sudden, under the transparent material of the ground, thousands of evil spirits broke free from the blood sea. They all clung to the transparent stone slab while screaming, as if waiting for food. Jian Wushuang frowned and took half a step back. Cui Jing clutched his chest and sat up from the ground. He looked at him with a complicated expression. He understood that the seemingly evenly matched situation was just an illusion. Jian Wushuang had not even used his full strength from the beginning to the end. He lost just like that. It was inexplicable, but it also seemed to be destined. The hall was deathly silent, and at this moment, a change quietly occurred. With Jian Wushuang as the center, the ground suddenly cracked and the fine cracks directly spread to more than half of the hall. Then it collapsed. The speed of the collapse was so fast that no one could react. Jian Wushuang, Chun Qing, and the others fell into the blood sea along with the gravel. Countless evil spirits cheered, as if they were having a feast. They climbed onto their bodies and dragged them into the blood sea. Looking at the collapsed ground in front of him, Cui Jing subconsciously looked back. He did not know when, but Lady Xia was already behind him. Holding the skull scepter, she looked at the churning blood sea under the pit calmly. Big sister, are they okay? Cui Jing swallowed and said. She did not say anything. After a moment, she slowly turned around. Drag them up in the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn and settle them in the walled city. Cui Jing nodded. Although he did not know what she was up to, he did as she ordered. The time for half an incense stick to burn was not long, but it was still quite long considering the situation. Cui Jing observed the movements in the blood sea, in case he needed to pull Jian Wushuang and the others up in an emergency. At that moment, the boundless blood sea churned, and the extremely dense blood qi transformed into ghosts. Like fish snatching food, they suppressed Jian Wushuang and the others who had fallen into the blood sea. The karma and killing tribulations that he had tried his best to avoid all swarmed towards him. As far as the eye could see, it was an extremely thick blood-red color. Jian Wushuang and the other four were helpless against it and could only helplessly float in the blood sea. If their strength had not been damaged, these resentful and evil thoughts would not have been able to erode any of them. But now even Di Qing was helpless. His true life had been reincarnated, and his current strength was not even as strong as Chun Qiu. A giant monster formed by evil thoughts reached out its hand from the depths of the blood sea and dragged them to the bottom of the sea bit by bit. The blood sea also gradually calmed down from its initial boiling. After half an incense's time, Cui Jing jumped on the sea of blood alone. Looking at the scene in front of him, which was like a deep abyss, he waved his hand. Instantly, a chasm was formed in the blood sea. The ugly giant monster formed by countless evil thoughts and evil spirits emerged from the natural chasm. The palm, which was more than 100 feet in size, slowly opened, and the unconscious Jian Wushuang and the others appeared in front of Cui Jing. Just where did these guys come from? Although they all look incomparably weak, why do they have such a soul-stirring aura? Cui Jing frowned. The confrontation with Jian Wushuang not long ago had obviously left a deep impression on him. Don't tell me they're also cultivators from another heavenly region? Or are they like those baldies, visitors from the sky? Cui Jing waved his hand and took Jian Wushuang and the others from the giant malicious spirit's palm. After examining them carefully and finding no useful information, he carried them and left. The entire boundless blood sea returned to its miserable state. Blood red. A blood red that was enough to corrode the heart spread over, soaking everything. This negative influence, which was filled with evil thoughts, despair, silence, and hatred, would even affect a Yen immortal if he was not careful. From there, he would be affected by the inexplicable karma and a great killing tribulation. Jian Wushuang suddenly sat up from the ground in shock, cold sweat dripping from his temple. As far as the eye could see, the blood sea was no longer there, only a quiet and cold bluestone road. Wasn't I still in the blood sea just now? Why am I now? Could it be an illusion? After checking the fusion of his yen power with the outside world, Jian Wushuang was sure that this was not an illusion. He slowly got up and stood on the bluestone road that could only fit two people walking side by side. He looked around. The hazy sky was suffused with a kind of hazy green smoke after the rain. On both sides of the bluestone road, there was a deep water body where lotus buds had just emerged. Looking into the distance, the hazy distance was connected to the deep water, giving off an indescribable sense of illusion and bitterness. Jian Wushuang stood in the middle of the bluestone road. In front of him and behind him, there was an unknown leading to an unknown place. Everything here was silent to the extreme, like a painting full of unreality. However, his expression was still calm. After thinking for a moment, he took a step forward and slowly moved forward. A long wind started to blow, blowing the lotus leaves that covered the deep water on both sides. At this time of the year, the lotus had not bloomed yet, and the huge lotus bud was almost submerged in the water. Jian Wushuang walked among them slowly, feeling an indescribable strangeness. He was certain that this was the strangest place he had ever been to since he started cultivating. This kind of strangeness was not the kind of horror when facing a life-and-death situation, not the kind of powerlessness when facing an enemy that he could not contend with, and not the fear of the unknown. Instead, it was a strange and uncomfortable feeling that was caused by a subtle difference that was different from what he knew. It was like a nightmare from a long time ago, or a muddled mumble from a serious illness. This kind of place should not really exist. Or rather, this kind of place was created by one's mind. Jian Wushuang remained calm. Although he had already understood a little, he still walked forward slowly like before. Under the strange and hazy sky, there was only one bluestone road that extended into the distance. On the deep and cold water, it was extremely desolate and lonely. After 100 steps, a chuckle that sounded like Yin Ling came from the water around him, came closer and finally gathered behind Jian Wushuang. Then, a soft and boneless palm landed on his shoulder. "Why are you walking so fast? Can't you wait for me?" Jian Wushuang did not turn back after hearing that. Instead, he continued to move forward. "All right, I won't play with you anymore. You blockhead. You're really boring." As soon as the bell-like voice fell, a petite figure in green and lotus clothes walked past him with light steps and headed forward. Jian Wushuang ignored her and continued to walk forward slowly. "Hey, can't you just wait for me? Can't you consider my feelings?" The petite figure chattered like a bird, as if she was extremely dissatisfied with Jian Wushuang's behavior. "Let me tell you, even if you don't like me, there are still many who like me. Who do you think you are?" Her petite figure was just short of pouncing on him and roaring like a little beast. Although she was extremely angry, she was helpless. "I was saved by you, so it's only right that you take care of me. Who doesn't do things till the end? As the saying goes, even if you send Buddha to the West, you will still send it to the West. It's not too much to let you take care of me, right?" As if she did not see Jian Wushuang's indifference, she continued to speak tirelessly. "What a coincidence, so you don't like to eat meat, and neither do I. What? Are you saying that you don't like to eat boiled meat, but prefer barbecued meat? Get rid of your carnivorous addiction. You hear me?" The petite figure placed her hands on her hips and pointed at him. It was only a short journey of 1,000 steps. Jian Wushuang seemed to be unable to bear it and finally looked to his side. Then he said calmly, "Your obsession is really persistent. Can you even jabber on and on to a stranger?" The petite figure seemed to have not heard Jian Wushuang's words. After throwing a tantrum, she began to talk again. "It's so beautiful. Look at this place. Isn't it beautiful? Let's live here from now on. Okay? We'll build a thatched cottage here. You can focus on your cultivation, and I'll accompany you every day and plant many, many lotus flowers." The petite figure was looking forward to it, so much so that she stopped in her tracks. At this moment, Jian Wushuang stopped and said calmly, "You're just an obsession. You can go now. Don't delay my journey." Her eyes suddenly dimmed and then turned red. The eerily still waters began to churn. Everything seemed to be fading and turning gray. "Come with me, okay?" She reached out her hand to grab Jian Wushuang, but it was to no avail. She followed the bluestone road and the deep water surface. Everything was collapsing. Just as it was about to be destroyed, all the lotuses in the deep water bloomed. As the full lotus bloomed, there was a palm-sized skull inside each flower. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes in the darkness. The scene and the unbelievable conversation had all disappeared. In its place was the sound of people sleeping. Jian Wushuang sat up and then noticed that he was in a spacious pavilion. At the same time, he raised his arm again. When he saw the weak but solid cobweb-like blood lines on his arm, his mood fell to the bottom of the valley. This meant that he had already been infected by the resentment, karma, and the great killing tribulation. Everything was too inexplicable. He tried his best not to be tainted, but in the end, he still fell into the blood sea and was tainted. This was definitely not a good thing. If he did not handle it well, it would be an irreparable crack in his state of mind or his cultivation. Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others were all sleeping beside him. After Jian Wushuang's investigation, it was obvious that they were more or less affected by the karma and killing tribulation. In addition to these two, Di Qing, who was sleeping on the outermost side of the bed, was less contaminated. At the same time, there was a woman who was curled up and sleeping beside Jian Wushuang. Wait, a woman? His mind immediately sobered up, and he hurriedly reached out to straighten the sleeping woman curled up beside him. However, to his disappointment, this woman was not Ling, but a heroic-looking woman he had never seen before. Although this woman could not be considered beautiful, her heroic face was still very recognizable. Jian Wushuang looked down. From her broken armor, she looked like the young guard who had held him hostage in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Could it be that cross-dressing is a trend nowadays? After confirming again that the heroic-looking woman was the young guard, Jian Wushuang was a little depressed. As if she felt that she was being watched, the heroic-looking woman slowly opened her eyes. Their eyes met, and perhaps she saw the strange look in his eyes. The heroic-looking woman subconsciously touched her cheek. "You don't have to touch it. I saw it clearly," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. "I'll kill you." Without any warning, she rose up and raised her hand to look at his neck. Jian Wushuang would not let her do as she wished. He raised his hand to resist and completely subdued her with a few moves. As yen power in her body had not recovered, she was fighting with her physical strength. Naturally, Jian Wushuang could easily subdue her. "Although I don't know what's the relationship between us, you have to be clear that the person who destroyed them wasn't me." Jian Wushuang released her and said in a deep voice. The heroic-looking woman did not attack again. After looking at him deeply, she got up and walked out of the room. Lying back on the bed, Jian Wushuang began to recall the strange dreamlike place in his dream and Ling that had disappeared after falling into this heavenly region. The heaven-patterned bone armor in Ling's hand was their only goal in this operation. If she disappeared, everything would be meaningless. Just as he was recalling everything that had happened, a desolate horn suddenly rang out from outside the pavilion. Jian Wushuang got off the bed, opened the window, and checked the situation outside. Almost at the same time, in a big city in the Sand Demon Cave with a loud noise, Cui Jing, who was half-naked, flew out and stood in the air. "Damn it! It must be that bunch of big bald donkeys who haven't given up their evil intentions," Cui Jing said hatefully. He tightened his belt and led more than 100 top cultivators to the top of the city in Sand Demon Cave. Soon after Cui Jing's departure, countless top cultivators began to walk out of every corner of the Sand Demon Cave like ants. Then, they all gathered forward, covering the sky and the sun. All the top cultivators in any of the villages in the entire territory of the Sand Demon Cave had come out. What's going on? Are they going to fight someone? Chun Qing opened his sleepy eyes and came behind Jian Wushuang. A thick bloody aura accompanied the raging sand, blocking almost everything. He nodded and said, "It looks like there will be a big chaotic battle later." Chang Qing immediately perked up. "Then, we can escape in the chaos." Jian Wushuang did not say anything else. If it was before, the chaos that was about to happen would be the best time to escape. However, the situation was different now. They were all affected by the inexplicable cause and effect. If they left now, their future cultivation journey would inevitably be hindered at some key points, and they might even be stopped. No one wanted to plant such a fatal seed in their future cultivation. However, Jian Wushuang was at his wits' end as to how to resolve the karma and the great killing tribulation. He did not know how to resolve it. If he left resolutely, he might never find a way to resolve it. He immediately explained everything to Chang Qing. When Chang Qing heard this, he hurriedly lifted his sleeve. When he saw the faint, fine, net-like blood lines in the meridians of his arm, he could not help but swallow. What kind of luck is this? Could it be that I fell into the blood sea once and was contaminated by karma? That's why we can't leave now. If we do, it'll be even more difficult in the future. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Now, I have to find a solution. Chang Qing's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He raised his left hand and made a cutting gesture on his right palm. Kill the leader of this devil's den, or kill all of these scumbags. Is that the final solution? Jian Wushuang nodded and said, "We can't rule out that possibility. But what we need to do now is not to act rashly. We need to recover our strength first. Then what's our next step? Let's follow them and find out what's going on." Chun Qing nodded, then turned around and picked up the still unconscious Chun Qiu. The three of them then left quietly. As they left, Di Qing, who had been in a coma, suddenly opened his eyes. Contaminated by karma? This is interesting. I've destroyed so many heavenly regions and slaughtered countless creatures. What can this karma do to me? Di Qing sneered and got off the bed. After checking that his strength was recovering steadily, he was in a good mood. He looked at the place where Jian Wushuang and the others had disappeared. After thinking for a while, he also chased after them. At this moment, the heroic-looking woman sitting at the top of the pavilion watched the few figures leave. She pursed her lips and followed after them a moment later, mixed with the blood qi of the wild sand. The group of three, led by Jian Wushuang and more than 1,000 top cultivators of the Sand Demon Cave, rushed to the city gate. "Brother Jian, don't you feel that these guys look very hungry?" Chun Qiu stood close to Jian Wushuang and said nervously as he looked at the top cultivators of the Sand Demon Cave who were approaching him. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. He lifted the true sword from Chen Qing's waist and released a majestic sword intent to force the top cultivators away. But then, more top cultivators squeezed over, as if they could not control themselves and wanted to swallow the three of them alive. Chang Qing's eyes were cold and he was ready to attack. These top cultivators, who were not even worthy of carrying his shoes before, were now overbearing to him. How could he not be angry? However, after the battle that destroyed the celestial continent, the three of them were almost killed, and their strength dropped to the freezing point. They could not recover in a short time. In the face of these brutal top cultivators, he naturally could not make a move. Just as the situation was about to go out of control, a deep and ancient cry suddenly rang out. Then, a black crow celestial image that covered the sky descended and stopped above Jian Wushuang and the others. The terrifying aura that was beyond imagination spread out. All the top cultivators in the Sand Demon Cave were frightened and retreated, not daring to come forward. Jian Wushuang looked up and saw Di Qing's figure. He glanced down and continued to move forward while hovering above the three of them. With the presence of such an aura, the 1,000 or so top cultivators did not dare to stay any longer and quickly left. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, not knowing what Di Qing was planning. Would he be so kind as to protect the three of them? At this moment, Di Qing heaved a sigh of relief. Although he could summon the Black Crow celestial image, it was only an empty shell of yen power, and he could not even exert 10% of his strength. However, he had taken advantage of the terrifying realm suppression of the Grand Yen Immortal on these ants, so he dared to release such a powerful force. Fortunately, he had succeeded. The reason why he did not leave was that he could temporarily rely on Jian Wushuang to avoid being hurt as much as possible. After all, the sword intent that Jian Wushuang had displayed in the ancient hall was enough to deal with most top cultivators. At this moment, on the city wall of the Sand Demon Cave, where blood was everywhere, Cui Jing was half naked, and his belt was loose. He had a fearless and rugged look. He held a dead branch in his mouth and held the 8-foot stick in his right hand. His eyes were full of disdain. In front of the city wall of the Sand Demon Cave, as the wind and sand receded, rows of soldiers formed by strict troops appeared in front of everyone's eyes. At the forefront of the army stood 10 monks in ivory robes, each holding a staff. Their bodies were covered in a thick layer of light, making them look mysterious and divine. The gloomy atmosphere in the Sand Demon Cave was dispelled inch by inch under the light of the monks. With the help of an immortal master, the evil place like the Sand Demon Cave will definitely be eradicated. Similarly, at the forefront of this army, an ancestor realm top cultivator with a true sword on his back and a sage-like demeanor saluted with one hand and said respectfully, "Immortal Master is kind-hearted. We have a total of 87 sects and a total of 16,000 disciples. Today, we will be at your disposal." The 10 monks nodded in unison. The leader of the group was a scrawny monk who was half naked and had a string of ring beads around his neck. He had a full beard on his face. He turned his shriveled eyes and looked in the direction of the Sand Demon Cave without saying a word. "Senior Brother Kongluan, when can we start exterminating them again?" A monk with a solemn expression and an air of authority stepped forward and asked in a deep voice. The skinny monk who was addressed as Senior Brother Kongluan shook his head slowly. "There's no rush. The purpose of our trip is not to eliminate them, but to set a rule. For scumbags like them, any rules are bullshit. The only way is to send them all to Elysian." The solemn-looking monk tried his best to suppress the curses that escaped his mouth. His eyes were as big as copper bells, as if he wanted to skin those guys in the Sand Demon Cave alive. "Don't talk nonsense," Monk Kongluan frowned. For a moment, the front of the army was silent. At this time, a disdainful voice came from the top of the city wall of the Sand Demon Cave. "Hey, why are those bald donkeys hiding their heads and showing their tails looking for trouble with your grandpas? Do you want me to help you loosen your bones?" When the solemn-looking monk heard this, he immediately said, "How dare you, Senior Brother? I'm going to teach that bastard a lesson right now." Monk Kongluan said, "Jian Qing, don't be reckless." At this moment, the sage-like old man with a sword on his back stepped forward and said, "Immortal Master, let us follow Immortal Master Jian Qing. Destroying the Sand Demon Cave is also a blessing for the billions of living beings." When Monk Kongluan heard this, he did not say anything. Another clean-faced monk came forward to pay his respects. "Senior Brother, the rules are no longer of any significance to them. The blood chi here is 10 times denser than the last time we came here. It's obvious that they've massacred countless lives again. If we don't punish him, this entire heavenly region will be in a bloody mess. What are those old bald donkeys talking about? Why aren't they attacking yet?" An ugly and ferocious top cultivator on the wall of the Sand Demon Cave said impatiently. Cui Jing glared at him and then said in a deep voice, "All of you, be quiet and be on guard. This time, whoever cuts off a bald donkey's head will be rewarded with a pool of blood." As soon as these words were spoken, the people on the city wall became restless again. All the top cultivators' eyes brightened, and they were already somewhat impatient. "What's going on? It looks like they're really going to fight." Several figures quietly squeezed onto the city wall. Chongqing placed his hand on his forehead, his eyes wide as he looked at the distant army. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. He looked through the light red mist and saw the monks standing in front of the army. There were two sides to everything, life and death and space and time. The resentment of the creatures in the sand demon cave and the blood qi were so thick that they could not be dispelled. Therefore, there would definitely be a side that was opposing it. Could these monks represent the extreme of the other side? Perhaps this was the opportunity to untie the inexplicable karma on them. A light flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He was waiting and taking advantage of the situation to move. In the sand demon cave, the evil top cultivators flew up as if they could not suppress the riot. They rushed out of the city and tore the assembled army to pieces. Cui Jing was getting impatient. He kept hitting the ground with his 8-foot-long rod. At this moment, the few monks who were standing in front of the black mass of troops suddenly stepped on the air and arrived. With kindness, Cui Jing, please listen to this old man's advice. Monk Jianqing, who had a solemn face, suppressed the discomfort in his heart and spoke in a clear voice against his will. Cui Jing, who was far away on the city wall, heard this and smiled. Kindness your mother. Brothers, charge forward and tear them to pieces. After receiving the order, a wave of bloodthirsty excitement rushed into the sky. No way! They fought in such a hurry? Jian Wushuang and the others could not believe it. Cui Jing was a mad dog. The black mass of top cultivators that covered the sky seemed to have broken free of their restraints and rushed out of the sand demon cave city like blood-drinking wolves. Like a black sky river that was flowing backwards. The monks who were here to give a useless lecture all put on a serious face and put their palms together. A myriad of precious lights shone down, dispelling the corrosive blood qi. As for monk Jianqing, he was almost filled with blood. That nonsensical phrase, kindness your mother, almost instantly ignited his fiery temper. What an evil beast! I'll definitely destroy your body and soul today. Jianqing stepped on the flowing cloud and flew up, his white robe fluttering in the strong wind. Junior brothers, help me! A total of 4 rays of light gushed out from the palms of the 4 monks behind Jianqing, blending into a rainbow bridge, and flew out. With a stern expression, Jianqing's image form put its palms together, faced the black sky river, and began to chant a spell. Infinite 10,000 forms. Formless great power. On a huge rainbow bridge, the heavens and earth trembled, and an impressive white dragon with 4 horns appeared. Under the white dragon, Jianqing was like an arhat with angry eyes, and he threw out a spell. Heaven and earth trembled. The white dragon opened its mouth and faced the tens of thousands of top cultivators with the power of heaven and earth. The two collided, and an unparalleled light erupted. At this moment, the earth was torn apart, and the sand fell into the earth's core. The black sky river was broken by the white dragon. Countless ferocious top cultivators fell from the sky, all of them seriously injured. At the same time, the image form of the white dragon was also shattered. Monk Jianqing, who was ashen-faced, was not afraid at all. Holding a black metal Buddha staff, he rushed into the camp of the sand demon cave and started to destroy them. The army of 87 sects could not hold back anymore. The sage-like old man suddenly pulled out his true sword and pointed it at the sky. Destroy the sand demon cave and open up the great path of cultivation for our juniors. His voice reverberated in the sky. At this moment, 87 sects and 16,000 top cultivators were engaged in a bloody battle against the sand demon cave. Black and white collided, and a tragic battle broke out. The wind wailed as the top cultivators continued to die and fall. They were the most talented geniuses in each sect in this vast heavenly region, and they had the brightest cultivation path. However, in the battle with the sand demon cave, they were continuously destroyed and died. In the territory of the sand demon cave, the gathered top cultivators' abilities were more or less affected. The number of casualties was rapidly rising. Countless geniuses died, and the broken corpses of divine bodies fell to the ground like rain. On the city wall, Jian Wushuang's face grew grave. When the chaotic battle broke out, The monks had already blocked the front line and were fighting with the top cultivators of the Sand Demon Cave. There was no way for Jian Wushuang to get close to them. Even if his strength was restored to its peak, he would still be seriously injured if he was not careful in this chaotic battle, not to mention that he could not control Yen power freely now. Is there no other way? Jian Wushuang was silent. At the same time, he was thinking quickly about how to get close. These monks are not inferior in strength. They were all in the Yen immortal cultivation realm. Naturally, they were not at a disadvantage in this chaotic battle. Ordinary top cultivators could not get close to them. Under their leadership, although the assembled sects suffered heavy injuries, they were still pushing forward, slowly pushing towards the city wall.